Yes, I saw that, and some land use lawyers as well, or at least one. Anyway, Said, it's now 6:27. We'll start promptly at 6:30.
Okay, Jane. Okay,
now
Jane, it's 6:30.
Okay, thank you, Saida. Good evening. This is the June meeting of the Landmarks Committee of Community Board 8. Saida Harrigan from the CB8 office will run us through the technical aspects of tonight's Zoom meeting.
Great. Good evening, everyone. A few notes for you, particularly if this is your first meeting with us. You'll notice that you are muted and unable to mute yourself. After each presentation, the co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak to each application. You can ask to be recognized by raising your virtual hand, and you can do that by going to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. It's important not to raise your physical hands or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you among the participants. If you're on a phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute. Once you're recognized by a co-chair, I'll unmute you and you may be prompted to confirm unmuting on your device. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you can access the raise hand feature by clicking the participants button on the menu at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. The chat function is available for technical support only, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. You can send me a chat if you're having any trouble and I can walk you through any issues you may be having. Jane, David?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Saida. With that, we're going to start. The first application, and we are here for the context and appropriateness only of these applications within the historic district. So the first application is 5153 East 73rd Street, Upper East Side Historic District. Mike House, the architect, I'm assuming will be presenting. The application is for restoration of the lower portion of front facade to its historic condition, renovation of the rear elevation, and a penthouse addition. Is Mike House here? Yes, I see him. Okay, thank you.
Actually, this is James Ramsey. I'm going to be presenting this project, if that's okay.
Sure, fine. Just spell your last name for me.
Ramsey.
Thank you very much. Okay.
All right.
So I'm assuming you'll want to do a screen share.
I would love to do that.
Oh.
If you bear with me, I'm not so great at this technical stuff.
Okay.
Okay, so just go ahead and start, I suppose.
Yeah.
All right. Let me do this as quickly as I can. Wait, hold on. Here we go. Okay. I assume this is working. Okay. Yeah.
It
Okay.
is, we can see it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. All right. So, hello. My name is James Ramsey. I am the designer of this project. My firm is called Rad Studio, and I'm joined here tonight by Sarah Davis, the project manager, Rhonda Wist, our preservation consultant as well. In addition to designing this thing, I'm also a part owner, along with Eric Goodman of 51-53 East 73rd. Eric and I purchased this building about a year ago to transform it into a single family home. I'm also joined in this meeting by Mike House, who is the architect of record of this project, as well as Valerie Campbell, who is our land use counsel. All right. So just first and foremost, 51-53 East 73rd is located in the Upper East Side Historic District. It's located on the north side of East 73rd Street between Park and Madison. So here you can see the building in its context. It's part of a row of 5 townhouses built in 1885, I'm sorry, that were designed by John G. Prague, who was one of the most prolific New York architects in the late 19th century. The buildings are built in the Queen Anne style, and number 51 and 53 were actually combined and converted into a small apartment building in 1945. And the original building's bases were consolidated and removed and replaced with a somewhat unsympathetic flat brick lower facade with a central entrance. And just in general, this project represents a bit of an opportunity to restore this sort of set of 5 historic townhouses to the public sphere that have not been seen in this fashion for about 80 years. So you can see from the satellite view that the context of the original row has changed dramatically over the years. To the west, there's a modern setback apartment that was built in 1973. To the east of the row is a classic 1929 apartment building designed by Rosario Candela. So the row houses immediately to the north of the row have been altered at the rear and have extensions that erode into that sort of internal donut of the block, let's say. 51-53 East 73rd also has a similar protrusion on the back of the building that protrudes into this donut in the form of a very large extension. And so what we're proposing to do is to remove this sort of unsympathetic lower brick facade from 1945 and to install a historically detailed masonry base that includes the restoration of the historic stoop, the original historic stoop at number 51. At the rear of the building, we're proposing to remove the altered and unattractive L that protrudes into the interior of the block and to replace it with a setback masonry facade that allows for lush landscaping in the rear yard area. And then finally, we're proposing to build a setback penthouse addition that is not visible from the public way. So first, we'd like to discuss the front facade. So here you see what happened to the front of the buildings over time. The original facades are shown at the left. The current conditions that result from the 1945 alteration is in the center, and our proposed design is shown on the right. So the intent is to restore the original detailing as much as possible, and we've been working closely with LPC staff to ensure the accuracy of our design and our materials. Here you'll see the restored building in the context of that original row. And although 51-53 will continue to function as a single building from the street, the proposed work will restore the sort of separate identities that they originally had. Our material palette is light painted brick and brownstone. We intend also to install a new slate roof at number 53 as per the original design, and to install new doors and windows that are based on the original conditions. as you can see, there's a lot of sort of interesting detailing, that we intend to restore, from these sort of paneled mahogany doors to the transoms of these divided windows, the detailing and roughness of the different types of masonry, even this sort of little porthole thing on the stoop, as well as all the sort of corbelling and coining that you have on some of the masonry patterns that march up through the bottom of this building. Here are some details in addition of that new door and entryway. It's a mahogany door with a sort of a brass kick plate, and we are reproducing this as faithfully as we can per the original detailing of the building. Some more details indicating what we're proposing for some of our windows, transoms, window detailing in general. And here is a photograph of the current base of the building at, from about, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, let's say. We're excited to be able to address what we see as a somewhat unpleasant condition created by the sunken areaway and that recessed central entryway. So these diagrams show how we developed our design strategy that is based on the historical condition and actually the conditions at the reciprocal buildings over at number 5759 East 73rd. So just pointing out the sort of base of the buildings and how we're effectively doing the sort of flipping mirror kind of thing. Here's a rendering showing the facades and the reconstructed stoop and areaway. In plan, you can see the restored areaway and stoop align with the conditions of the rest of the row, number 57 and 59. We will need a revocable consent for the restored stoop and areaway. In order to maintain a minimum 8-foot clearance, we're speaking to the Parks Department about potentially relocating the tree pits, only one of which is occupied. Here's an enlarged.
I'm sorry to interrupt. How far are you extending into the public way?
We are matching the existing condition. So currently we're at about, I would say about 12 feet away from the curb. About 13 or 14 feet away from the curb. And then we will get to about 10 feet away from the curb.
So you're actually expanding the areaway by 3 to 4 feet.
Yes, per the original footprint of the stoop.
Well, I'm just trying to get a handle on, not the original, but right now.
Yes, of course.
That you're going to expand 3 more feet into the public way.
Essentially, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, of course. And, if there's any other questions, please feel free to jump in. Anyway, so yes, right here, we've got an additional drawing showing a section. Let's see. Now let's move to the rear of the building. The rear of the building is fairly unattractive now. The yards aren't really landscaped around here. The rear facades have been altered over time to accommodate multifamily use by using new windows, window openings, and fire escapes. And you can see from this diagram here that the block is actually composed of a variety of buildings built at different times in different styles. And I guess most importantly, most of the original row houses have been altered over time as well. Hold on one second. I'm having a bit of a technical issue. Give me one second. Okay. Okay, well, okay, so the rears of many of the buildings, like I was saying, are pretty utilitarian. The original details have been lost over time. However, we are very fortunate to have a row house diagonal to us that is designed in 1935 by William Lescaz, who is pictured at the above upper left, as you can see. All right, zooming in, you can see the front and rear of the Lescaz row house. We were particularly intrigued by the way that the openings and the fenestration has been treated. Good. Okay, So as designers of this project, we were also influenced, especially in the rear yard, by the evolution of the landscape and by the topography of the original landscape of New York, the sort of primeval Mannahatta, which later, of course, became Manhattan. And so we're very interested in reintroducing this sort of native plant concept to the urban environment. And this sheet shows some others' work, as well as some of our own work at the low line on the left, at 41 West 76th, also on the right, as well as some other design examples that bring nature back into this sort of built environment. Here's a slide that also shows some additional studio work, both in the city and elsewhere, in which we try and marry this sort of fenestration and new glass technologies with landscape design in order to sort of integrate the two and have them communicate with each other. All right. And so here's our proposed design, which is a nod to the modernist masonry facade of the Lescaz house with this sort of natural primeval garden overlay. It's masonry with punched openings and this sort of unabashedly modern composition. And just to show you how we achieve this massing, we've removed the L that protrudes into the rear yard and created a compliant 30-foot rear yard setback, which opens up the center of block to increase light and air. We've tried to evoke the asymmetry of the existing facades by the extension of the bulkhead screen, which you'll see on the sort of right of our rear composition, which is exactly the width of the original L at 51 East 73rd. All right, so here we have an existing versus a proposed elevation. In the new design, you can see that we're referring to the original L via the taller composition on the right. You can see that we're also excavating approximately 2 feet below the existing cellar floor to create a more generous basement and cellar space, and continuing the excavation under the rear yard, which is approximately 12.5 feet. There's going to be landscaping on the rear of the yacht, dense landscaping to sort of pull off this landscaping concept with sufficient soil to allow for trees and their root balls. And I think it's important also to note that we do not have to underpin because of the adjacent conditions. And then here's an additional rendering of the rear facade. The glass at the base, I want to point out, is also slightly reflective, both for privacy's sake and also to reflect this landscaping that we're proposing in order to sort of create this almost, I don't know, infinity mirror that amplifies the greenery of the rear yard that we're proposing. Now, moving to the penthouse.
Just 1 second.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry to interrupt again. What are the measurements on the dog leg that you're removing?
Let's go back to it if that's okay, because I don't remember it off the top of my head. Okay, here we go. Are you talking about how far does it protrude into the rear yard?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find out how much additional square feet you're adding to the rear yard by removing the dog leg.
Oh, we're not adding any additional square feet by removing it. We're actually subtracting volume and.
Well, that's what I mean. You're subtracting, but how much? That means if you're subtracting, you're adding to the open space. You're subtracting the dog
right.
leg, adding to the open space.
That's right. The open space is just by and large getting bigger.
Well, maybe you could just give me the measurements of the new open space.
Yeah, it's 30 foot deep.
30 feet deep by what?
35 wide.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Let's see, where was I? Okay, here we go. Let's move to the penthouse then. So really quickly, here's a proposed section of the penthouse. It's set back 22.5 feet from the front cornice and basically houses a new central stair and a studio space. There's also a mechanical enclosure on top of the roof. We've done a mock-up and none of the new construction is visible from the street. Here's a section detail indicating the parapet detail. There's a new non-reflective glass railing that rises behind the existing parapet.
Could we get the measurements on the penthouse, the new addition?
Absolutely. In fact, here we go. Which portion of it?
The space you're going to use on the roof. The
Sure.
penthouse, what are its dimensions?
That's right. We have a main studio space that's 23 feet by 17.5 feet, let's say, and a stairwell volume that's about 21 feet. Let's call it by 12 feet. So it would be those in combination.
Maybe you could just go over that again. The main studio is going to be 23 feet by 17.5 feet.
Correct. That's on the sort of the
And
back of the building.
And
Yeah.
then the bulkhead, which I think you just mentioned.
The stair itself also then goes through a volume that's about 21 feet by about 12 feet.
Okay. And then there's a bulkhead, right, for the stair?
No, that
But that incorporates.
encompasses all of it. Yeah.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. I think I left off back here. Well, no, I think I left off back here, which is an elevation indicating something similar, just indicating the existing condition on the left versus the proposed penthouse condition on the right. And if you look in plan at the top image, you'll see the location of the existing bulkheads, which are sort of, these two rectangles that you see here, versus what we're proposing for an expanded penthouse that is set back over here.
One more question, Mr.
Yeah.
Ramsey. Sorry to keep interrupting you, but what is the height of the penthouse?
Oh,
Maybe that previous slide showed it, but
yeah, exactly. It's just shy of 64 feet off the sidewalk, basically.
okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course. Okay, let's see. And okay, yes, and this is very simple, I guess. These, on the lower right-hand corner, you'll see the mock-up that we've constructed. A, B, C, D are photos, as far points as we can get. They're indicated on the plan at the upper right, and it is not or should not be visible to the public way. And so I just wanted to finish here with a rendering of the front facade, and also just wanted to thank the committee for your patience and open this all up to various questions.
Well, thank you so much. I
pleasure.
think we'll first go to the public. I don't know whether there's anyone from the public here, Saida.
Yes, if you're a member of the public and you would like to speak, you can raise your virtual hand. So we have a few people. There's Will Kump. Confirm your meeting.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, and please identify yourself and where you live, your address.
Sure. William Kumpf, and I own a unit at Gracie Townhouse, 401 East 89th Street.
Okay.
So I had an opportunity, just a few quick comments here, an opportunity to listen what I thought was a very thoughtful dialogue here about the existing structure and what's proposed. And my takeaway, a few positives here that were my takeaways. One is I love the idea of increasing the outdoor space. If my numbers are right, I saw it sounded like 30 by 35 feet, so approximately 1,050 square feet of additional open space. Is that right?
It's around that.
Okay, great. So I love the idea of adding the open space, and then just looking at the imagery of, I'm sort of a history buff, so looking at it's kind of an homage to the history of the buildings and the images from some of the what it used to look like, and what I think some nice modern design. So I think it incorporates very well on the block. Very familiar with the block. I love the design, and I think it's I love the intent of the project. And I really do think it's a vast improvement, the new proposed design over what's existing there right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, William.
Thank you. Next, we have Marshall Berman.
Yes, Marshall Berman, 400 East 71st Street. I walk by this block almost daily, and I'm, pleasantly surprised to see this presentation, and I hope this comes to fruition. The existing structure and what's on the outside, the entranceway, and the tree that was cut down, and just the existing entranceway, as I just mentioned, is basically almost abominable to look at. This was ruined in 1945 or whenever they did this work. And, to see someone coming in and spending money and time to put back the stoop and to do this work, I think it's spectacular. I think it looks like it's going to be a beautiful project, and I'm completely in favor of anyone who's going to look to spend money and time to bring back these beautiful townhomes. So, kudos to whoever's doing this, to the developer or the investor. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Monica, confirm unmuting.
Hi, how are you? It's so fantastic to be here, and thank you for this very, very thoughtful.
Could we have your address? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, 920 Fifth Avenue.
Thank you.
So as a neighbor and as someone who has professionally been involved in various historical restoration and renovation projects for a quarter of the century, I have to say that I am like vastly excited by this project. It is so refreshing and historically appropriate. I love the fact that this institutional like looking brick front facade is going to be now revived with this beautiful light sandstone, and the current architectural hodgepodge of the back facade is now elegantly streamlined and vegetated with what seems to be completely appropriate for Manhattan. So kudos. If I am to vote, it's a yes, all in capital letters. I can't wait to see the execution of this intended work.
Well, that's very kind of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lionel.
Yes, hello, everybody.
Your address,
I'm sorry, 57 East 73rd. I happen to live on the penthouse, and I can see the mock-ups. So first of all, I think it's a great project, and it's beautiful. So kudos to that. My concern was regarding the mock-up and the penthouse that is being built in the back. Based on the mock-up, I wasn't sure if the James Lennox house is the back aligned with the rear setback. Do you know that? And if so, yeah. Oh, yeah. If you could, yeah, on the mock-up,
Yeah.
the photo where we can see that the mock-up itself is beyond that point. And I was wondering if the mock-up itself was perhaps half a foot, 1 foot, or 2 foot beyond the rear setback. That was one of my questions right there. Yeah. On the bottom right and the photo on the left, it seems to be beyond. Yeah, just a bit. Yeah, yeah. So I'm just wondering if it was just a little too far on the rear, or if it's actually aligned. I don't know. I hired a surveyor for 57 East 73rd, and I'm just guesstimating based on what I see that it might be a little too much back, but I couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to see maybe on these images. What, if you can see this portion right here,
Yes.
I guess that post would represent the rear of the penthouse, which, I mean, because of the thickness of this party wall right here, I think it's a little bit of an illusion, but it should be aligning with the rear facade.
Yes, and so I actually can see that it is not aligned. So that was my only concern for the project. So based on what they did, but otherwise I think it's a great project.
Thank you.
So if we could just make sure that it's aligned to respect the rear setback, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. And I just want to make one comment there, which is simply that, because we are removing a lot of the bulk on the back of the building instead of adding bulk, we are pulling it in 30 feet, which I'm pretty sure should align exactly with where they put the rear facade of that building. So de facto, we will line up with that.
Great. I mean, either way, it's much better. It's going to be more open. I'm very excited. And I noticed that there was a tree that had fallen about a year ago in the back. I don't know if that, because you're trying to put native vegetation back, is that tree, can it be re-erected or like re-straightened, or will it be just chopped off? It's too complicated.
Well, I mean, I think
beautiful tree, and it seems very healthy, and it's still growing. So.
Well, you know what? I think we definitely intend to take another look at what's actually usable back there. But I think overall the intent is to, create this almost restoration landscape that harkens to like what existed in New York before the Dutch people came or whatever. So it's almost like the more wild and park-like we can make it, the better in terms of this design concept. You know, as a sort of a, I don't know, design inspiration, I think we're kind of taking the Ramble, which is at the center of Central Park, and using that for like a lot of our cues.
No, I'm sure it's going to be beautiful. And last question regarding the trees, if we're staying in that area, because I noticed that many people sit on the brick tree beds. Is that going to be aligned at the street level, or is that just a detail that you don't know yet? Out of curiosity.
Well, that's an ongoing conversation that we are having with both the DOT as well as parks. And so, you know, we by restoring the stoop, sort of by restoring the stoop in order to keep an 8-foot minimum distance to that tree well, we would need to remove that one tree well that has no tree in it, if you know the one I'm talking about. I mean, it's kind of a stump, I guess, there. So the intent would be to actually remove that altogether.
Oh, and not. Oh, so we'd be losing a potential tree bed, or?
Well, yeah, yes. Well, I mean, we plan on planting that front area, so you know the net to net tree would actually hopefully increase, but our intent is to, well, relocate the tree, as it were.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Colette?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yes, I just wanted to say,
Could you give us your address, please?
yes, 920 Fifth Avenue. I want to just say that I think this is a huge improvement from the eyesore that's there at the moment. I love the restoration of the front facade. And you know what I really like about it is the nod to East 59 East 73rd Street. It looks very similar. I can see it looks perfect, and it really reminds me of the HBO drama The Gilded Age. It's perfect. I love it. I love it. So the front is perfect. I really like it. The back, I think, is really great. I love the idea of using the native plants, and I just think it's very tastefully designed. It's quite understated, but just really beautiful. So I really think it's a huge improvement. So I'm really for the project, and well done to the developers and the designers to really improve what is such a terrible eyesore there at the moment. I walk past it every day, and it's really disgusting. So this is going to look wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
You're welcome.
Hi, this is Elizabeth's husband, Dave. Just turn off my other phone. We couldn't get my my phone to hand raise. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. We're at 49 East 96th Street now, and I actually grew up at 829 Park, so I am incredibly familiar with the neighborhood after those 30 years of growing up on the Upper East Side. This project, I think the people running the project did an incredible job of thinking about what the neighborhood could be and transforming it into that, staying within the visual palette on the front facade. I think a lot of people, Monica, I think, said it really well, finding what that block could look like if it was found its real design understanding. And so it's an upgrade in the front, and then the back. What a great idea to take the cues from historic New York and then bring it into a New York City approach that has, I think, more contemporary elements, but is very respectful of the city we live in and the space that they're occupying. And so finding that balance. So I think it's a very hard needle to thread. So we fully support that project.
Thank you.
Thank you. We also have, let's see, Kate Manning, I think, is having trouble raising her hand. So Kate, you can go ahead.
Hi, I'd like to speak about the following project. I'm sorry, I'll figure out how to raise my hand in a minute. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Erica?
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi. I live at 215 East 68th Street, and I am in favor of the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jane, I don't see any other hands.
Okay, then we can go to the committee and we can start in alphabetical order. Thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Yes, I'll have to leave it mostly to my fellow members because it turns out I'm not myself. I'm an imposter, and it took me 15 minutes to get on the Zoom. So I missed the beginning of this, but it looks very attractive to me. And unless I find out something more from our colleagues, it looks like something I would very much like to support. It looks like they've done a good job.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Next, we have Gail.
Thank you for a very thoughtful presentation, and indeed, it looks like a major improvement. I have a couple of questions, particularly regarding the public way. When you say that there'll be 3 feet more of space, are we talking about the planters in front of the building? Are there other tree pits or only one set of tree pits?
Right.
Because
in its current configuration, there are 2 tree wells. Actually, the inspiration buildings that are 2 doors down, numbers 57 and 59, are a nearly identical condition to what we are trying to reproduce, because that's the original design, right? And unfortunately, the minimum distance, which is actually a fairly new rule, I'm led to believe, is that we're allowed to have between what we are proposing and the tree wells is 8 feet. And unfortunately, if we restore that stoop, we are broaching that 8-foot minimum clearance. And so we are having to talk to the Parks Department about potentially getting those trees relocated.
okay, and from the front of the building where we'll have landscaping to the curb, how many feet is that total?
That's a great question. Give me 1 second to look that up. Okay. Okay. I guess please bear with me here.
Of course.
Let's see. So the question is how much space would be from the proposed stoop slash
to the curb.
It would 10'2".
Okay, 10'2". So are you going to put in a new sidewalk as well?
That would be the idea.
Because if you put in a new sidewalk and you figure out a way to how can you relocate the trees? You can't do that without larger tree pits tree fences that actually have to be kind of unfortunately intrude, even further into the sidewalk. So I was just curious as to how you might, what creative means you're considering as far as the relocation of being able to have some trees.
I mean, we have a couple thoughts in mind, but that's actually a sort of an ongoing conversation that we're having with the DOT at the moment.
I mean, my sense is, Gail, that they're only planning to have 1 tree pit out in front. Is that correct?
Is it in front of the building or closer to the curb? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Oh, okay. I think I understand what you're asking. What we're proposing is to remove both tree pits currently.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, because the reason being the public way, as far as, to me, having a wider sidewalk is beautiful for everyone aesthetically, but also just from the safety and being able to get that 8 feet, that's actually not that wide. When you start to look at it, people can barely have 2 across walking, with an 8-foot width. So it's a shame, but it's just kind of reality. I also had a question regarding the reflective glass in the back. You know,
Yeah.
the back design is so interesting, but with reflecting the nature, and I love the idea of using the native plants, what type of light is going to bounce off of that glass that might impact the neighboring rear yards?
Yeah, I mean, we're not proposing something that is, going to be like a mirror or two-way mirror or anything like that. It's more to say that, there's these different kinds of glasses that have, this sort of matte finish to be like a little bit more invisible. And I guess our intention here is to, keep that degree of reflectivity. So really, especially during the day, it looks like almost a magnification of that garden that we're proposing.
Okay, that sounds quite lovely. And then you said from ground to the top of the parapet, it's 64 feet.
It would be, yeah, sorry, continue.
No, go ahead. No, please.
Oh, no, that would be to the top of the utmost limit of the penthouse would be the 64 feet.
Right. And does that not include the parapet, or the parapet is woven in to the stairway? I mean, in other words, what is the total height from the ground going up to the highest point?
To the highest point, that would be that 64 feet, right? I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but it would be this line right here. Is that visible?
I can't really.
Actually, I have
okay. I
have a better diagram of this right here.
Okay. And so currently it's 60 feet, the building? Before you add the penthouse, what is the current height of the building?
Got it. It would be what, 64 minus 9.5 feet would be the top of our sort of main parapet, if that's the question.
Yes, that's what I wanted to know. And those are my questions. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you, Gail. Jane, a member of the public, has another question.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, Lionel, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on the tree beds. So it was really sad when they cut one of the two. Now I'm learning that both of them are potentially going to disappear. While I love the idea of having the new stoop mirroring 59 East 73rd, is there any way that 53, so the building more east, could be a little more back to allow one of the tree beds at least to remain?
I mean, that is one of the possible solutions that we're discussing with the DOT.
Because next to James Lennox's house, I mean, they do have the little birch trees and everything, but it was really sad when they cut down that very big tree. And if we remove both trees, I think it might just have a big void, it's a beautiful building, but it would be sad. So I'd really love it if we could just conserve at least one of the two tree beds.
I know exactly what you mean. There's I mean, I don't know the history of why there seems to be just a stump over on the western side of this.
One of the trees was sick, and so the city came and cut it down.
Got
I
it.
think we're going to continue with the executive session, which we're in now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Michelle.
Thank you. Can you go back to the image of the front facade, please?
This one.
That one, yeah.
Sure.
So, yeah. So are you changing the cutouts or anything of any of the windows? Sorry.
So everything above the parlor level is going to be effectively just refurbished because it is intact, right? It just is in bad need of a paint job, right? There will be, some refurbishment of the general details, sort of on the upper portion of the building, but our work is mostly concerned with what's happening on that parlor level as well as the garden level. And the openings, well, you know what, I can rewind this, but the openings are intended to exactly mimic what once upon a time existed as per the original design.
Okay, so the original design of the windows were 1/1, with the exception of that arch window, which has multi-pane.
Exactly. All of these windows had a transom with a very fat mullion, and then these sort of large mullion dividing these sort of two 1/1s, if that's what you're asking.
Well, that I can see on the parlor floor of the townhouse partition on the right. But if you go to the next floor, they just look like 1/1s.
We're talking about on the second floor.
Yeah.
Right. Let me rewind to the actual drawing. Let's see if you'll bear with me real quick. This is
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, this is a fairly accurate representation, and one thing that I do want to call your attention to, and thank you for noticing. But if you actually look at this sort of more axon rendering, you'll note that there was originally a transom that we noticed that we would like to restore as well.
So you're keeping that,
we would like to
or restore it.
rebuild the transom back into the design per the original design, and what had also originally existed there was a 1/1 beneath a transom.
And are all these windows wood?
Yes.
Is that true on the rear as well?
On the rear, you mean for our proposed rear design?
Yes.
No, those would be metal frame.
Okay, let me just go back to what you need the irrevocable consent for. I'm looking at the areaway behind the fencing, and I'm looking at the stoop. The property line ends where?
If you look, the property line aligns with what is this, the front facade of number 55 East 73rd, if that helps to visualize it. Let's see. Yeah, actually, no, hold on. Let me see if I have a good picture of this. I guess we could look at this for the time being, but the front facade of this sort of center of the 5 buildings aligns with where the property line actually is for all of these buildings, the lot line.
Is it the facade or is it the fence? That's the property line.
Is it the facade or the fence of which building?
On the one that you use as an example, the
it is
57.
Right.
You're using 57 as an example, correct?
Yeah, well, okay. So
Or 55?
57 and 59 are the sort of benchmarks that we are using to determine,
Okay, so on those buildings, are
yes.
the property line, is the property line the facade of the building? Or is it on 57, is it the fence? And on 59, is it the stone wall?
Got it.
Which is the property line?
All 5 buildings protrude past the property line.
And all of them protrude the same amount past?
No, 55, it protrudes a little bit less than the other ones.
And your property line 51 to 53, I know before you came up with about 3 feet, but it looks like it's more than that. Sorry, how much do you protruding?
You're asking what the difference in facade depth is between 55 and 53. Is that the question?
That's one question. And then on 51 to 53.
Because I'm sorry, that distance was 5 feet, not 3 feet, between the front facade of 55 and 53, if that's.
So they both have an additional 5 feet in front of them?
5 foot, let's see. Okay, so just to clear through this, right? The property line aligns with the front facade of number 55. The actual thing that they, the sort of areaway that they have in front of number 55 protrudes 5'7" into the sidewalk. And that line continues for 57 and 59, and that is also the line that we're proposing to match.
So it's about 5'7" past the property line.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. No, the front looks beautiful. Can I just go to the rear?
Yes. Is there an image in particular that would be helpful?
Yeah, the actual
Just
proposed,
the big old, yeah, okay, hold on.
the
one second.
actual proposed design.
This guy. Is that-
So that's it. That's fine.
Yeah.
So that garden
Yes.
is recessed. I mean, not recessed, but dropped. You've excavated that out from the basement.
Exactly. Well, it's actually it's on many levels, because the idea as part of this sort of primeval restoration is that it be somewhat akin to, you know, the creek bed that once upon a time existed here based on, you know, historic maps that we've researched. And so what we're able to do is we're able to have it be sort of this, you know, this slope, and where the slope increases, we're able to have enough mass to actually accommodate root balls of large trees. And so that's something that's sort of baked into the overall design. Does that address that question?
Well, how much excavation did you do? In other words, you from the first level of the house, you've got 4 or 5 steps coming down to greenery, a lawn, greenery, which then slopes down to the basement.
Right.
Now, did you dig that up?
Well, okay, so let me back up a step and say that the cellar level beneath that is also being excavated. So the
Okay.
footprint of the rear yard is being excavated beneath there, and that is being that's being dropped down to accommodate.
I think Michelle wants to know how many feet below grade are you in the rear?
Well, at the
But
bottom,
you're saying it slopes down, so it's hard to give an exact measurement.
that's part of my answer, and I'm, you know, I don't intend to be, I don't know, I guess evasive about it, but let me just say that the curb base plane is about 2.5 feet above the base plane of the garden level. And so we're excavating down to that, well, in terms of the garden, right? And so the garden slopes, of course, to get up to about 8 feet above that as well.
So the greenery that's there is hiding windows at the cellar level.
That's
That's
exactly right.
In the winter time, if that greenery is not there, what do those windows look like?
Well, I mean, those would be very similar aluminum framed windows to what exists above. And there's photographs. Let's see. Well, it's a little bit difficult to see, but oh, wait, sorry. There are photographs of this kind of system that we've been using recently and currently in projects that we've designed.
Is that the picture?
Yeah, sorry. These are photographs of the actual window system that.
In the cellar level?
Yes, this is also a
Okay.
match.
I'm asking because in the winter time, when the trees are bare, when you look at it now, ordinarily I would not be for that much glazing in the rear. However, you did a really good job and it looks very good. And considering the kind of glass that you're going to use, it will mitigate some of the concerns about there being so much glazing. But in different seasons, when the greenery is not there and you have the single pane, what looks like sliding doors on that first level, and above you have the glazing. It's a little different with the arch windows that you have. Those are terraces. Are those terraces, I assume, that you can walk out on?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. And then when you go down to the basement level or cellar level, there is a distinction. You're calling it the cellar level. So does that have the clear glass like the doors that lead on to the steps on the main level?
They are much smaller openings. You know what? There is an elevation of this, which I think I can show you right over here. where
And
you-
those are doors as well. You can exit through them into
Yeah.
the garden, correct?
And yes, and I'd also just like to quickly note that having, basically, if we're moving with this concept of having this intense connection between the interior of this building, the facade, and this sort of, profusion of plantings that is this primeval garden, it's also the case that we don't want it to be this sort of bare bone, this bare skeleton thing for half the year either, right? And so the intention behind the planting strategy is also to keep it a mix of deciduous as well as evergreen in order to actually keep it not so spare looking in 4 or 5 months out of the year.
Okay, last question is about lighting, both in the front and the rear. Do you have any exterior lighting?
Yes, on the front, we're proposing to, let me see if I just have a nice picture of this. In the front, we're proposing to have a sort of a lantern above the
The door?
mahogany entry doors, which is actually a match to the historical condition, as well as a light at the actual gate.
And how about in the rear at the stairs?
The rear, we don't really have lighting. Well, wait, are you talking about at the stairs that step down from our terrace
Correct.
to the garden?
Yeah,
We'll need to have in-step lighting in order, just for safety
for
reasons.
safety, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, that's essentially it.
Okay, you've answered my questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Alita?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'll start with the easy stuff. I don't think I have any objection to the penthouse, except I do have a question about your choice of words. You said that the mock-up, the addition, should not be visible from the public way. I'm really looking for the words would not be visible from the public way. So I'd like reassurance that it would not be visible.
It's
With
completely
respect to
not
the
visible from the
Pardon?
public. It is
It won't
completely not visible from the public.
Okay.
Correct, yes.
Thank you. From the back, I have trouble with reflective glass. You're not very specific about how reflective it will be. And as Michelle pointed out, there is an enormous expanse of glazing in the back. There are other people who live back there, even with the plants. And I have a specific question. I don't know if it's appropriate, but with respect to the size of the root ball of the tree, it's very close to the adjoining property. And how will you ensure that it won't impact their basement or their foundation or any other structure? And with respect to the front, I cannot support this at all. The idea that the city would lose 2 tree beds so that there could be a garden at this house, I find appalling. The public needs the space on the sidewalk, as we have seen with the apartment building that I realized has been there for about 50 years. There are a lot of people who live on that block. It is a way to get to Central Park, to get to the Frick, to get to Madison Avenue. It looks like a beautiful street. And the idea that the shade and the beauty of trees would be lost for those plants, I find that not to be acceptable. I don't really know, although I'm sure that you've said how deep the stoop is, but it would seem that there could be some alternative to the way it is. I am surprised that the Parks Department would even entertain eliminating trees for this, and I just don't find it suitable for all the people who live in the city to lose 2 trees. So I am opposed to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Hi, thank you for this application. I, like Elizabeth, didn't get to see the entire discussion. I had to drop off for a little bit, and so I have no questions at this time, and I'm listening to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony?
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I think in a way, to my way of thinking, it's a little bit of a shame that so many people have already spoken. I agree with Alita completely, and I'll explain why in a minute. I agree completely with Alita about the front yard. I think it is, to put it maybe even a little more directly, to replace 2 public trees with a private garden seems to me to be outrageous. Now, having said that, maybe I'll talk about sorry. The more I look at this, the more annoyed I am. In the first instance, it seems perfectly reasonable for you to recreate what was the original street facade of the building. Seems perfectly reasonable. However, the more I think about it, the less honest this is, and the less actually related it is to what you are doing. What you are doing is creating a false front, if you'll pardon the use of the term, a Disneyfication of what was, for at least a number of years, 2 townhouses that is now being turned into a single residence. And as a single residence, it deserves, as a historical building, to look as if it is in fact a single building. And what you've done is you've said, okay, well, we'll keep the upper 3 floors, we'll fix the lower 2 floors and make them look like they used to, but we'll eliminate a stoop because we've only got 1 front door, and then we'll make everything the same color, and that'll make it look like a single building. But what that does is it ignores the architectural character of the original structures, plural. And if you look at the pendant, the mirror, not quite, mirror buildings next to it, one of the actual interesting qualities of this architecture, of this Queen Anne architecture, is color. And what's the one thing you've taken away from this? Color. If you look at the original buildings as they were in the photo that you showed us of the so-called original condition, the building on the left is dark, just like the building 4 doors down, and the building next to it is light colored, even though we don't know exactly what color it was, just like the building 2 doors down from that. And so the composition of the 5 townhouses kind of unity in their variety, emphasizing each of those 17.5-foot lots. And I'm sorry, Jane, I'm going on so long, but this is really important. We are too often gulled into saying, well, it's okay, it looks just the way it did originally, when it's not the original building. The entire interior is new. It was multiple dwelling before. So why do we have to pretend it's 2 17.5-foot townhouses? It's not. It's a 35-foot townhouse. And in fact, what you've done at the rear, which I'll get to now in a second, says, yes, this is a 35-foot townhouse. The front facade, the street facade, and I'm sorry to say it this way, I'm sorry to be so harsh, it's already been a long day, betrays to me, and also the comparison to the back, that you are less than totally comfortable in a traditional style. That's okay. A lot of people are. There are days when I am. But now if we go to the back, it's very sweet that you talk about the Lescaz townhouse. The Lescaz townhouse, its rear and its front, have very similar architectural elements. It is a modern townhouse. if you had come to us saying, I want this to be a modern townhouse, sort of like the Lascaz townhouse, some of us would have said, oh my God, just go away. Others might have said, well, that's an interesting idea since it's not the same building it was. Okay. I love the idea of what you're doing in the rear yard. A, you're making the rear yard bigger, and B, you're juxtaposing the modernism of the facade with a sort of natural landscape. It's a terrific idea. It's wonderful. It's really a great stroke. I don't really like the reflective glass. I have to admit, I'm not crazy about the facade itself, but I wish you had expressed some more consistency in the design front to back. And it pains me truly that you feel obliged, or at least feel you have license to take away so much of the public way. And it's not 3 feet, it's got to be at least 4 feet because you've got at least 4 steps going down from the sidewalk to the lower level. But I will not support this this application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John?
I didn't ask to speak.
I know, but you're a member of the board and you're here.
I know, but I don't have an opinion on this that I should express.
Okay, no problem. Next, we have Marco.
Thank you. Can you put the diapositive number 7?
I'm sorry?
Can
Which
you
one?
put the number 7?
Slide number 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think you just passed. That one.
Sure.
Well, I had to be very fair. The comments that my colleague did, I think maybe reflect a lot. And immediately right away, I went to see this picture. And I found that it's not exactly a repetition what it is in the past. Yes, you have 2 stoops, and the idea is at least you recreate the 2 one. And it's true that you converted in one family house. And as a one family house, then it will lead in another direction that I will talk later. But so far, I had to give the benefit of the doubt to you that the facade by itself is hard to predict. Yes, it has some tones different, the right building to the left. It looks like a more clear and the other one more opaque. But well, usually in landmark concepts, as long as it's minor changes, I think you did a very good job in that part. And probably that is my opinion. With respect to the trees, you don't have conversation with the parks because the regulation is very straightforward. You change the CO, you must have every 25 feet 1 tree, and that's it. And the dilemma is right there. Your dilemma is basically you encroach more the public way. And that is a little bit concern because your job as a landscape professional, you did a very good job. But the issue is we have to respect the public way. That is the dilemma right here. It's not because you are a bad designer, you are a good designer. And my inclination is probably I don't know, it's up to the chair, is probably to separate that part and maybe deny that part. On the rear part, yes, you're lucky that you can still having a very big facade, glass facade, because very soon you won't be able to do that because of the new, the city of yes, they will not allow to do this kind of facade. So my impression is, in my concern is more the airway that probably it should be very smart bring back to the origin where you have right now, it complicate your landscape. I'm not trying to design, by the way, and maintain the two trees in the front, because actually this is a part of the city, and I would like to have it. And thank you so much.
Jane, David?
I think we'll hear from David, but before we hear from David, could I just get a measurement on that glass, that big glass window at the second floor? And in the rear, at the rear elevation?
If you could give me 1 second here, I have to look this up.
It looks like it's the width of the house, but might not be.
I mean, I'm gonna have to wing this measurement a little bit because there would be what, 2.5 feet on either side. It's 35 feet wide. So let's say it's 30 feet wide of glass, and I want to say 19 feet tall on these you're talking about the large pieces of glass, right?
Yes, yeah, the second floor. So it's 30 feet by 19 feet?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, thanks.
And
Thank
also,
you.
I just also want to note that there currently exists only one tree out front. Just for
But there are 2 tree pits.
that's
Okay, thank you. We will go to David.
First, just a question. The material in the front,
Yes, sir.
what is it made of?
Well, currently it is all brick painted
That I-
brick, and that is also been proposed. And then from the parlor level down, it would be painted brownstone, which is, you know, what the historical condition is.
Well, when I look at the 1885 photo, I doubt that's painted brownstone.
It's brownstone, and what we're proposing is to have painted brownstone to match the rest of the building.
Because the building got painted white once upon a time?
Well, partially, yeah. I mean, this building was consolidated in 1945 into a single, building with a single entrance, and part of the sort of, part of the appeal of it as a buyer was that it was a white building. So, that's something that we intend to carry forward.
Well, I admit that I get a little tired of seeing all of these buildings turned into white buildings, mostly limestone these days. So a painted white building is a new one. I think that Anthony made the point very well that historically it's not white. Historically, it's multicolored. So all of a sudden we have a building that is meant to be historic and is painted white, but that is not in fact the true historic color. On the other hand, you're trying to bring back the stoop, and yet that's not really, to me, a major issue. I think just a good overall design that integrates the top and the bottom is probably the right solution. And again, we're not here to design, we're here to talk about appropriateness. I think that just taking a look at the 45 to present shows that you could have put in an entrance on the ground floor level, as so many of these buildings have done it quite nicely and appropriately within an overall design for the historic building that this is. It also, I think, would have been nice to relook at it historically from a color point of view. I also understand that clients are clients and that Landmarks probably would approve an all-white building because Landmarks is accepting evolution. And if they're accepting evolution in color, they would also accept evolution in the sense that you don't have to put the stoop back. You can find another way to do it, which is everybody else, well, not everybody, but many people have already pointed out, would therefore enable the wider sidewalk, even restoring the 2 tree pits although Marco points out that only one may be necessary, but we'll take two if we can get them. I'm assuming that you're putting transoms in on all the windows on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors as original?
That's correct.
Okay, because it's not consistent in some of your drawings.
Yes, I know. On a couple of these renderings, it is we're missing those transoms, but it's in, you know, it's in most of these drawings. It's part of the restoration that we intend.
Okay. Going to the rear, I have no problems with a front and a rear being different. Sometimes it's okay and sometimes not. I don't think you necessarily had to use Las Casas as your inspiration, but once you've done it, I don't have a major problem with the rear, but I do question this business of a reflective glass. The reality is that during the day, people aren't going to be able to see in, but at night, it's going to become a giant light box because it reverses itself. I have no problems with that because I assume most people are going to have some kind of light control, whether it's shades or whatever it happens to be. People are usually respectful of one another, and I don't see it as a problem for the neighbors. But I really question having a combination of clear glass and gray glass on the rear.
The idea of it being some sort of specially reflective glass, I think, is maybe something I overstated here. You know, the idea is not to have something that is a mirror per se. It's more that
I understand that, and that it's not a mirror, but the fact of the matter is you're not there to enjoy it from the inside looking out. And if you're in the garden with the richness of whatever you're going to do, I'm not sure that having it reflected in the glass is necessarily going to be really important to experiencing it. And I just have this thing about reflective glass in a building like this. I think the glass wants to be clear. I think it wants to be consistent, but I have no problems with your proportions. You've made a big gesture. Sometimes architecture is big gestures, and that could be very dramatic and very exciting for the people who own the house. On balance, I'm disappointed. I think, as Marco points out, you clearly have capability to do the right job. I just don't think this is the right job. I think you haven't been considerate of the street. I think you made a mistake about how landmarks will think about historic buildings. And I think that you don't need the stoop, and therefore I can't support this. If it gets divided into front and rear, I'm okay on the rear, but I can't support the overall concept.
Thank you, David. My sense is we would have to divide it into two parts. I do think it's egregious to take away any trees, any part of the public way, and to take away trees from the public way is especially disingenuous in many different ways. So I think we'll have to divide the front elevation and take that as one part and then take the rear as a second part. I'm not as, should I say, bowled over by the rear elevation. I'll go along with David, my co-chair, and support it. But I don't like the reflective glass at all. It looks too institutional to me. And I do think it's amusing to show us a map of what Manhattan looked like when there were no buildings on it. That's a first for us. And
Jane,
for the public.
Jane, forgive me for interrupting. I'm not supporting the rear. You know, for a second.
Okay. Well, I'm not supporting the rear. I'm not supporting the rear because I think the reflective glass is just too commercial and too institutional looking for this neighborhood, and not contextual within the historic district. So
I think there's a misunderstanding about. Sorry.
We're in executive session now, so unfortunately, your time to speak is over.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
But in any
Okay.
case, we are going to now go to formulating resolutions, one on the front, one on the rear, unless there's a sense that we should turn down the application as presented.
Jane, I think I think the resolution should be to turn it down as presented. And in all deference to Mr. Ramsey, even in the rendering, you can see that glass is going to be very different from the rest of the glass. And if you accept that, that's one thing, but if you don't accept it, it's another. And I personally would prefer not to see that.
Thank
And
you. I also want to make a comment to the public who came, the members of the public who came and spoke during the public part of this presentation, that we on the committee do take our responsibilities very, very seriously in terms of context and appropriateness within the historic district. It's not that we don't admire the architect and his innovative approach, but our responsibility is context and appropriateness within the historic district. So I just wanted to clarify that because I know a lot of you came and spoke in favor of the application. So I think it's time for someone to formulate a resolution if there
Well,
is
resolution to disapprove as presented.
anyone who wants to do that. David, do you want to
I
formulate
just did it.
a
And seconded
resolution?
by Marco.
Okay. And it would be basically the tree pits. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go to a vote. I think we could stop the screen share so that we see our faces again. Thank you, Saida. So we are going to go to a vote. If you're all in favor, I forgot to ask, all in favor of calling the question, any opposed? So we're going to go to a vote. If you're, I think we'll do a roll call vote, Saida, on this. This is a disapproval, so a yes would mean no.
Okay. So it's not going to be split into two parts anymore. Is that correct?
Right now, no. We'll see
Okay.
how it go.
Okay, 1 second while I unmute everyone. Okay, Elizabeth,
Yes.
Gail,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Alita,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Anthony,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes. And I
Marco.
think John could, sorry,
Sorry, Jane, go ahead.
I was going to say, John, if he's here, he could vote as a member of the board.
Yes, he left.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Marco?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, that's a unanimous disapproval.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will only say that it's a disapproval of a very well thought out, very well presented project. But I think the basics were just not the right place to start.
Thank you,
Okay.
David.
We're at 1209 Park Avenue, expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. J.L. Ramirez, architect. Modern style building designed by Lucy and David and constructed in 1960-62. Application is for front facade redesign, rooftop addition, rear facade alteration, and rear yard alterations. Sounds very familiar. Is the architect here?
Yes, 1 second while I unmute them.
Okay. Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yes, may I begin? Actually, Saeed, I have a question. I got a new presentation, slightly revised late this afternoon from the architect. Could I share my screen?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you.
Are you doing the whole presentation?
Yes, Chair Halpern, it's nice to see you.
So nice to see you also.
Okay, all right, just bear with me a moment while I get this set up. Thank you for letting me do this. Okay.
Okay, can everyone see 1209 Park Avenue?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So hello, committee members. My name is, thank you for having us at this hearing this evening. My name is Jackie Prudu-Vallon. I'm the preservation consultant on this project. I'm here today with Jose Ramirez and Jonathan Breyer of JL Ramirez Architect. This project is 1209 Park Avenue, a modern style row house originally built in 1889 and altered to its present design in 1960, when the house was converted into a school building. The proposal you're seeing tonight is for the redesign of the front facade and the installation of a rooftop and rear addition. So I'm trying to advance. Okay. Here's the house's location on the east side of Park Avenue, mid-block between 94th and 95th Streets. It's in the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. And as you can see in the map on the right, it's actually on the edge of the district, in that the neighboring apartment building is outside of the district. The area shaded in red indicates a portion of the historic district on that map on the right. Here's the building in context, looking at the east side of Park Avenue between 94th and 95th Streets. To the left are the houses that are part of 1209's original row, and to the right is that large apartment building that is outside of the district. This house was originally part of a row of 7 houses, excuse me, that included 1209 to 1217 Park Avenue, and around the corner, 112 and 114 East 95th Street. And here again, what you're seeing today is the 1960 facade alteration. Excuse me. Here's the view across the street, looking at the west side of Park Avenue, the Hunter School building, which is also incidentally not in the district. Here's some historic photos. Here's on the left is what the house looked like in its original facade in the 1940s tax photo. You'll note that by the early 20th century, its neighbor on the left, 1211 Park Avenue, had already received a Neo-Georgian style facade update, which was one of the classically inspired architectural styles that were popular in that era. By the 1980s, in the center photo, you see the buff brick stark facade that it has today. And on the right is the 1991 designation photo. Here are some close-up photos to show you better detail what the existing conditions look like. The basement level window, the below grade entrance, the view looking at it from the north and south on the sidewalk. And here again, in this sort of center photo, is its neighbor 1211 Park Avenue, which was altered in 1922. Like 1211 Park, there are many other examples of early 20th century classically inspired facade redesigns in Carnegie Hill, as this was a fashionable thing to do to one's house on the Upper East Side in the 1910s and 1920s. Here are some examples of Neo-Georgian and neoclassical facades, which also received basement level entrances. I can go through the addresses with you, but these are on East 94th Street, East 92nd. Again, all of these within the Carnegie Hill Historic District. And there's one example in this district of LPC approving the alteration of a modern style building's facade. This is 10 East 87th Street, a house co-designed by Felix Augenfeld and former LPC Commissioner Jan Hurt Pokorny. It was built in 1955 with a facade of buff brick and travertine sheathing at the base. And subsequently, LPC approved the installation of metal panels at the upper floors, stucco at the base, and replacement windows. In nearby historic districts, there are many examples of houses whose facades have been redesigned with LPC approval, as Chair Helper was referring to earlier, I'm sure. And again, a classical language was used similar to the facade redesigns that were typical of the early 20th century. On this sheet are 3 houses in the Upper East Side Historic District, which were approved for alteration by LPC, and which incidentally also replaced facades that had a style designation, and which also kept their basement level entrances. So here we're looking at 127 East 71st Street in the top left corner, which had a modern style designation. On the right, upper right, is 33 East 63rd, which had a neo-Grec style designation. And on the bottom is 7 East 63rd Street, which had a no style designation. And yes, all of these were placed in limestone. So page 10. Here are additional examples of LPC approved facade alterations, again in the Upper East Side Historic District. And again, classically inspired designs with basement level entrances. Going left to right, this is 12 East 76th Street, which was originally without a style designation. 31 East 63rd, also no style. On the bottom left, which I'm highlighting here because this designation photo is kind of cut off. 38 East 75th Street, which was a recent approval for a new limestone facade, which also brought the building up by, I think, 1.5 stories. And 45 East 74th Street, which was a no-style building. And lastly, just a couple more examples. Also in the Upper East Side Historic, well, this one on the left is the Upper East Side Historic District. The one on the right is in the Metropolitan Museum Historic District. So these are 113 East 64th and 10 East 78th. Now, just to bring you back to the, our building and our block, here are some historic maps that show you the development of the block. So on the top left, you're looking at the 1916 Bromley map, whereby you see a block that was mostly individual row houses. Below that, by 1930, there's a couple of apartment buildings creeping in. By 1955, which is in the upper right, we lose those small scale buildings that had been present. And let's move down here. And this is the current block plan, which also shows the proposed 5-story full width addition that we're going to be describing to you within this presentation. What I'd like to point out to you here is that, again, within the red dotted line is a large apartment building, which is not within the historic district. And also the fact that there are full width rear additions present within this block as well, which you see by their footprint. There are 3 here on 94th Street and 2 facing 95th Street. Here are some photos taken from the roof. This is an aerial view looking down into the block. And here you can see some of those full width additions. Unfortunately, this block is so verdant, it's so green at its interior. It's hard, unfortunately, we weren't working on this project over the winter. Otherwise, we would have gotten the winter photos. But for now, we have a very leafed out block. So here you see also the neighboring building, which incidentally has a rooftop addition that is within the same plane as its rear facade, and also has a large glazed opening at the bottom, as does this building next door. And now just to briefly review the issue of rooftop additions, because we're going to be showing that as well. There is precedent within this district for LPC approving visible rooftop additions. I'm sure you're all very familiar with these buildings and these previous applications. Here is those small, those houses that are located on the east side of Park Avenue at 91st Street. So this is 1141 to 1149 Park, where there are 2 rooftop additions that are visible at a distance as you walk west down the side street. This is on the bottom is 48 East 92nd Street, which you see the real view of a photograph in the middle taken from Madison Avenue. And then as you zoom in, you can see more clearly the visible rooftop addition. And a few more examples of LPC approvals for visible rooftop additions. This is 63 and 65 East 92nd Street on the top, which the arrows indicating, you can best see here in the zoom in on the right where the visible additions are. And on bottom is 60 East 93rd Street. Again, the red arrows show you where those additions are. And I'd also like to point out that there's also precedent for this type of project, also having not just a redesign or reimagining of a front facade, but also a rear addition where the addition rises the full height of the rear and connects to a rooftop addition, essentially creating a partial floor. This is that previous approval I showed you for 38 East 75th Street. So that this on the left was its previous facade, a rear facade, and this is the new facade that was approved just last month. Well, I should say went to hearing about a year ago, and the permit was just issued recently, I think. So now we come to our proposal. So here we're showing you on the left the existing front elevation. Maybe I should zoom in actually, if I can. Okay, so on the left you see the existing front elevation. The middle is the proposed. It would be clad in limestone, rusticated limestone at the base, a limestone block at the upper floors, a projecting cornice, profiled enfranements around the windows with projecting sills supported by small brackets, and entablature supported by pilasters to highlight the entrance, which, as I showed you in previous examples of historic, classically inspired buildings within this district. That was a typical way to highlight highlight the entrance on a building where the stoop had been removed and the facade had been redesigned with a classical language. There would also be some ironwork at the windows, because the windows would be in-swing casements. So for safety, it would be necessary to have these little railings. Incidentally, they're also proposing to have a gate at the top of the stairs. And we're showing you that here in this detail, because if we showed it here in the large building elevation, it would really obscure that entrance. So we're just trying to show you that entrance. So here's the existing partial plan at the front facade areaway, and here's the proposed. Just to show you, there's really no change in the footprint, just the installation of a new railing and a gate around, redone stairs going down into that below grade entrance that exists currently. Okay, well, I'm trying to advance. Okay, so here is the proposed elevation in context. Just showing it to you and what it would look like with its neighbor that already has this this neo-Georgian facade, and again the apartment building next to it just to the south that is not in the district. Now here's a rendered view for what this house would look like. Incidentally, unfortunately, the renderings, the updated renderings were not available in time for this meeting, but the renderings should also show that gate that I showed you in the elevation drawings. But the gate came into the project a little too late for us to be able to get that incorporated into the renderings for tonight's meeting. So I apologize for that. Here are some more views, just looking from the northeast and from the southeast. And here are the roof plans. So on the top, we have the existing roof plan. In the middle is the proposed roof plan, or the proposed partial floor. Incidentally, you'll note there's an existing stairway bulkhead that is not going anywhere. That's being reused, kept and reused. The rooftop addition itself, let's see, one sec, yeah. Well, let me start from the beginning. The proposed roof plan, it best shows how the proposed rooftop addition is really a partial floor, as the rooftop addition will extend over the full height rear addition that will square off the existing rear L. The rooftop addition is set back almost 42 feet from the front facade, and the building owner did that intentionally to be a good neighbor, because he didn't want his family's new home to block any windows at the neighboring apartment building. Here are photos of the existing roof conditions, looking east and west. Here are sections through the roof, showing you the new massing for the addition. The The rooftop addition's overall height would be about 12 feet, approximately 12'4" with including the parapet. So about 9'10" tall from the roof to the ceiling, and then about 2'6" above that for the parapet. And you see the outline of the existing roof here outlined in red. Here are photographs of the mock-up that was built, looking east and west on the roof. And here are photos that demonstrate to you that the mock-up is not visible when looking at the building from just in front of it on its own sidewalk from the east or west or in front. These photos, as you can see in the key plan, these photos are taken from the mall and from across the street on Park Avenue. And so it's showing you that from across the street, it's still not visible. Once we start walking a bit east on 95th, I'm sorry, a bit west on 95th Street, the rooftop addition mock-up does become visible. So on the left are the actual photographs, and on the right are the zoomed in images from those photos. So what you're seeing on the right is not the realistic view, it's a zoom in to just make it more clear what you're seeing on the left. So you can see the 2x4s here. And again, walking a bit farther west, the addition does become visible, popping up over the front facades of these buildings. However, with this image, I'd like to point out that this addition will be finished in red brick. So the intention is to have that red brick addition really essentially disappear against the facade of the red brick neighboring building, which is also incidentally, again, not within the district. So we're trying to camouflage it, essentially. It's our belief that it's just going to disappear against the neighboring building. Here's the existing building section, where you can see the rear L and the proposed building section. So here you see the rooftop addition connecting to the squaring off of the rear L. Here are photos of the existing conditions at the rear. So here's in the top left, this is the rear facade. It does have this exterior staircase. That's because the school had been used, I'm sorry, the building had been used as a school for decades. So that exterior stair was necessary. But that's the existing L that we are proposing to add on to create the full height rear addition. So at the rear, I want to note that the existing L is 11 foot 10 inches deep by 8 foot 9 inches wide, approximately. The proposed rear elevation will square out the existing L and be 11 foot 10 inches deep, still no deeper than the current footprint of the existing L, and about 20 inches wide. I'm sorry, 20 feet wide. So the depth of the addition would not change, only its width. Large glazed openings are proposed for the lower floors with a small balcony at the first floor, and smaller window openings are proposed for the upper floors to recreate a residential scale and character at this rear facade, which is really lacking now. The rear facade would be built of red brick with elegant brick jack arched headers at its openings. Here's the existing rear facade in context with its neighbors, and the proposed in context with its neighbors. And just to show you what the rear yard looks like and the changes there. So the rear yard is currently covered in asphalt and then these rubber pavers. And just to highlight again, this is the extent of the rear yard, which is also at a very different grade than the neighboring buildings. This is the proposal, is to to restore some green planting to the perimeter of the rear yard. And here you can also see the difference in the footprint of the rear, where you have the rear L here in the existing rear yard plan, and the proposed, you can see the addition of the proposed rear yard plan. And with that, that is our proposal. As I said, the architects are here to answer questions. and we welcome your comments. Thank you.
Thank you for a very clear proposal. And I think we should go to the public. Saida, see if there's anyone who would like to comment.
If you're a member of the public who would like to speak, again, you can just raise your virtual hand. John?
Hi, my name is John Silberstein. This is my wife, Caroline Arisman. We live at 1199 Park, as duly noted, the building that is not within the historic district. We look directly north onto the roof of 1209 Park. In 1999, we bought our apartment because, unlike many other Park Avenue apartments, there was light and air in every room. And we also wanted to be in a historic district because we wanted the certainty of knowing we weren't going to wake up the next morning finding a huge building next to ours, which we had happen in another neighborhood. So I'd like to make 4 points about the impact of the proposed additions to 1209. First, I'm only speaking from the mock-up, and as a layperson, my reading of the plans, but it looks to me as though it's about 14 or 15 feet off higher than the existing roof line, bringing it above our window. And you can kind of see that on page 24. So it's somewhere above our window and the bottom of the 7th floor. And as a result, we would lose dramatic light and air in 2 bedrooms, and our living room would be looking out into a brick wall. You can see that on slide 24, where the top of the window is not visible in the bottom where the presentation would put it. Second, the height, obviously, whatever it is, whether I'm right and it's 14 or 15 feet or it's something less than that, would make it visible or more visible from Park Avenue. It's also, based on the mock-up, some 5 to 7 feet higher than the addition on the adjacent building 1211, which was done, I think, some 10 years ago or something like that. Third, I think, as made clear in the presentation, Landmarks really cares about precedent. And my understanding is that most of these buildings have the same traits. 1209 is like 1211 and so on and so forth. So if 1209 is allowed to build above its neighbor, will 1211 come back and ask for an increase also, 1213, so on and so forth? This is a dangerous precedent. Fourth, the presentation shows that the L shape in the back, and this is really the key for us, is being increased both vertically and horizontally. So the vertical increase is, again, I think it's about 15 feet, but I could be wrong about that. And then the extension is more, the width is being extended by more than double. And while it is true that I think there are some full width extensions in other rear yards in our little neighborhood, none of them goes to the existing height of the roof, much less an increased height of the roof. And that's a really dangerous precedent for Landmarks also. So while I know the community board is going to look at the visibility from the public space and from the open space with respect to the donut, I really hope that you'll take account of the negative impact it would have on the neighbors, both us and the houses on the north side of the block of 95th Street and our neighbors in 1199 Park. And we ask that the community board really reconsider the height and footprint of the addition, that they be reduced so that they're consistent with the other additions in the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have Lo.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, can you back up one slide, please? My name is Lo Vandervalk. I'm representing Carnegie Hill Neighbors, and we're very concerned about this application. We think there are many flaws in it, and we think that we're hoping that there could be substantial improvements. I will proceed If you look at the building was built. Oh, if you look at the rear yard back in the 1890s, you'll notice that the houses on 94th Street at the bottom have no rear yard addition, and the houses on 95th Street at the top have the L extensions. Usually they are 2 floors. Some have been built up to 3 floors. None have gone all the way. Also yes, I want to look at the group of A are 5 houses on Park Avenue and 2 houses on 95th Street, and they were built as a group so that their, part of their charm is that their rear yards were related. And it is true that very soon the owner of 1209 did add a rear yard addition, but only for less than half the width, although it did go the full 4 stories. If you look at B, that was a house 116 East 95th, that about 10, 12 years ago or more. The owner wanted to expand into the rear, but did it by shortening the L by half, even though the drawing here doesn't show that. And he did not go for the 4th floor. And he did have a rooftop addition, which was set back by 1.5 feet. So you see, okay, so that's an example where the top floor is kept open, which is something that Landmarks generally prefers, because then you can see the original cornice and you have some sense of what the building historically looked like. And that's why all these L's, to the degree that a few additions have been made, none have gone to include the 4th floor. Now, if you look at the group C, the representation of this map is wrong, because within that oval, there are 3 houses, and they all have 20-foot rear yard extensions because they were larger. The rear yards were much larger there. And again, none have gone all the way, none have included the top floor, which is the 4th floor. All these houses, by the way, were built consistently with four stories. I know the language can be confusing if you consider the first floor is by strict Landmarks standards, it's called the basement, and then you end up with the basement and 3 floors on top. But we think it's much clearer if we go by floor, so 4 floors. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. Now we have an aerial view, and what's interesting is the upper left are the houses on East 94th Street. Those are 4-story houses, and that's where I told you that the rear yard was built out about 20 feet is probably less. But again, the first 2 stories are all about the same, and then there's a setback for the 3rd floor and nothing at the 4th floor. Now, if we look at the lower right, the neighbor, there was a rooftop addition done again about 10 or 12 years ago, and that is actually set back also, the rooftop addition, from the rear by 1.5 feet to show the distinction. But there was no buildup in the rear. There was no rear extension. What didn't exist, and it wasn't added. So there's been a very, very limited incursions into the rear yard for this one of the best preserved donut spaces in Carnegie Hill. And even though the apartment building takes up roughly half, look at the in the middle where the apartment building has maybe only 2 stories. That's the garage, but it allows in a lot of light and air. Next photo, please. So here we see the numbering, and I'm trying to use consistent numbering so you can compare floors. That's the existing rear facade as it exists. And the next slide is the addition of the 5th floor, which in this drawing there may be something wrong with the representation, but I didn't realize that the 7th floor was that heavily impacted, and it may not be. So there may be something wrong with these drawings, okay? Because I think I'm using consistent counting methods. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we've seen this earlier by the presenter. This is we're looking south now, and we see that the windows at the 6th floor are all open, and now the next slide. Yes, now the view, the light and air coming through to the 6th floor has been really obstructed, and does create a far lesser quality of life, even though the windows facing on the north facade are unobstructed. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the view from 95th Street and showing some rooftop additions. The rooftop addition is evident. I'm not going to make a big deal of it, but that is the fact, that it is evident, and you cannot see the rooftop addition of its neighbor, which is in black, and you can barely see it a bit to the left because of the angle at which it's taken. Okay, next slide, please. Now, what we did was we tried to understand the impact. The existing, and the L is in orange so that we can distinguish it from the building itself. And now if you look at the right, that is the buildup being proposed. And so the extension for the full width of the building is in blue, and that matches the cornice line, which under alternate circumstances could have been preserved by not going for that last floor, even though you're getting the 3 floors below it to the full extent of the L. So that's a regrettable obliteration of historic fabric. And then if you look at the rooftop in purple, rooftop addition, it covers both the rear addition and part of the roof, and is a part of the original roof. As a matter of fact, it looks almost as though there is an equal amount in the rear above the L as there is on the normal rooftop. So this is really a prejudice pushing the rooftop addition to the rear and into the rear yard open donut space. And also I want to say, this creates a 5-story sheer wall in the rear yard, and it's thrust out from its neighbor, and it's very close to at least 2 buildings on 95th Street. And I know that the presenter mentioned, I think it was 38 East 75th Street. I looked up those drawings, and it's a Robert A.M. Stern revision, and Higgins and Quaysbarth did the drawings. But I can tell you that the rear addition is variegated. In other words, it's stepped up as you go higher and higher. The recess becomes greater and greater. In some cases, it's 2 floors, and then it's 2 floors more, and then there's a recess and so forth. But there's no sheer wall like this. In fact, a sheer wall newly constructed like this, which juts out from its neighbor and which blocks the wonderful windows in 11 East 99, this is a real, that presents a real hardship, but it also presents a challenge to the donut that we have never seen like this before. And I think there's overreaching going on here, and I think that a revision really is called for. And I think that is the end of my presentation. And thank you very much for allowing me.
Thank you, Lo. Next, we have Susie.
Yes, hi, everybody. Thank you very much for letting me speak today. My name is Susie Waba, and we are, my husband and I are the owners of one of the homes that is part of that original 7 homes that was built as a sort of a one unit at the turn of the century or just before the turn of the century. We are the corner home, and as Lo had mentioned, we are extremely worried about the rooftop addition. We do not have any garden space because we are the cordon lot, and so really our roof is our only external space, and we're extremely worried that having an additional floor, really a massive wall, will certainly kill a lot of our light. We do have a garden out there. We try and keep a green roof out there, and it will certainly just enclose the space a lot more. And so we are very, very concerned and very worried about the impact that this is going to have on certainly on our light and on our views and just on air coming through that area, as we do use our rooftop. As I mentioned, it is our only single outdoor space. Thank you for allowing me to talk.
Thank you. Next, we have Kate.
Hi, my name is Kate Manning, and I live at 114 East 95th Street. It's around the corner from 1209. It's one of the 2 brownstones tucked into the corner. It faces the rear yard of 1209. Our house in it, as well as number 112, have a foreshortened rear courtyard. We're on the end of the donut. And so any alteration and encroachment into the donut by this building would be a real compromise to the gardens that people in the back enjoy and that are so verdant and so green, as the architect put it. But they're a community effort, and they're enjoyed by not just the people in the townhouses, but also the people in 1199 Park. So while we're in favor of restoring this building, which needs it, we're strongly opposed to any encroachment into the so-called donut hole across the width of the building, and also this elevation on the roof, which is visible from all of the backyards in the houses in the building and in the donut hole, will further compromise the light and air of this historic neighborhood. And we have to, again, as Mr. Silberstein, I believe it was, mentioned, talk about precedent. It seems that we are facing this question over and over again, people wanting to take part of this green area in the back of these houses and use them for private use with things that have been enjoyed by the community for many years. We've lived there for 30 years. So as Mr. Vanderbalk of Carnegie Hill Neighbors said, it really seems an unprecedented massing, to use your word, of solid walls. The sketches may not show you what we would face at 112 and 114, but should a solid wall be pushed out from the back of this building, should the fencing change so that no more light or air is admitted, plants will die, and the communal feeling of the backyards will be lost. So I would respectfully hope that the committee will ask for a revision, a scaling back. We spoke about our neighbors at 116, who I think it was in 2002, wanted to expand half the length of the backyard, but were convinced and required, I believe, to scale that back. And I would hope that that in this case there will be a scaling back, and we won't face further encroachment into the donut hole, which would be a terrible precedent. So thank you so much for taking good care with these issues and for letting me speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Ella.
Hi, it's nice to meet you. My name is Ella Baff, and I live at 1199 Park Avenue. And thanks for taking my approximately 2 minutes of comment. I'm very happy that 1209 is being restored as a single family home, as I understand it. Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm thrilled that the facade is being returned to something that to me looks architecturally appropriate in design. And I'm very happy that the unattractive rear of the building is getting a needed facelift. Nonetheless, I'm very troubled. I live in Carnegie Hill because in New York City, where real estate and daily experience are ruled by the square millimeter, Carnegie Hill values New York City history, historic preservation, and therefore is among the least likely neighborhoods to have air, light, and view intruded upon or destroyed. And air, light, and view are important. The addition to 1209 will block enough of the view and light in my home for me to be talking about it here. It's very distressing. I'm also very concerned about my neighbors, particularly on the A and B lines, but also others in the hood who have spoken and maybe will speak. Windows will be entirely or partially blocked, as I understand it, and they will now stare at a brick wall that will be very, very close to those windows. It's important to care about our neighbors, even if many others in the building will be unaffected by the 1209 expansion. And along with concern about precedent and the impact of height and other design elements on streetscape that are critically important, I'm even more concerned about people who will be most affected by the expansion. So my net message here is that I really do not want the height and other encroachment extensions of 1209. But if something has to be there for your enjoyment as new neighbors, that it would be low impact, such as a roof garden, for example, and that whatever is built won't be at the expense of other people. Thank you.
Is David?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is David Gold. I'm at 55 East 87th, and with me is my wife, Lorraine. We actually are the owners of 1209, so I thought it might be worth taking a couple of minutes just to introduce ourselves. Thank you, the committee, for the time, and the public, and also maybe address some of the things that have been said, just to put a few things on the record there. So first, as I mentioned, we are from the neighborhood. We have been there since before our first daughter was born. Our oldest is now 9. So we have, a number of children. Unfortunately, a growing family. We love the neighborhood, and we want to have the opportunity for both our growing family and extended family to sometimes stay. My mom is 85, and we're working on getting her into the neighborhood. So we have very strong love for the family, and have had everything positioned in such a way so that we can all be there. Just a few things I wanted to note because I think maybe they're not clear or haven't come across clear. First, we're very responsible. We're neighborly folks, and we're very how would I put it? Obviously concerned for our neighbors. And so to that end, I'm sure the folks from 1199 probably can attest to it. We actually had the mock-up moved 3 times because we did not want to block any of the lot line windows. Yes, they're lot line windows, but given the opportunity and given the ability to move things, yes, it did move further back, and the height had to move to adjust, but basically we did everything in our power, and you can see it from the drawings, not to block any of the windows. Second, what I think we should note there, and I think it's maybe not clear to the folks who spoke, or to you, is that there's a jut in the building of 1199 in the back. It's very hard to see from the pictures, but none of the windows are, we're not building next to any windows. Yes, you can, they're lot line, but we're not doing that. There's actually several feet away from those windows. There you go, you can see it at 1199. So they would have light and air. We're not, as I said, we're not boarding anything up. The initial mock-up had posed that, and we said absolutely not. We're not doing that to our neighbors. So we have moved it 3 times. And so I think that's it's important for everyone to just recognize that we're several feet away from 1199 windows. I also want to highlight for one of the other neighbors who mentioned that we are looking to square off the L, but it's basically squaring off an area that's already there, right? So that view isn't really changing. She's already looking at a sheet wall on the side of the L. So the widening of that addition, does move it over a little bit, but it doesn't actually change that view. It's the same view. It's the same, depth, if you will. One other thing I just want to throw out there, we actually are not asking to build to the full backyard, right? The setback required is 30 feet, and we're actually leaving a setback even more than that 30 feet. We're just squaring the area because candidly, it didn't make for a decent layout of bedrooms for our children, right? The way it was. And so the way that we're able to figure that out is basically to square it off. So we haven't gone to, we haven't gone to the max. We're not asking for, just to get to a 30-foot setback. There's more than the 30-foot. We're just trying to get to something functional, being conscious of our neighbors. And, so with all that, I do appreciate, everyone's time, and, we look forward to joining in the community once this is done.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have David.
Thank you. My name is David Weintraub, 1199 Park Avenue. I'm the president of the board of directors of the 1199 co-op. I don't want to repeat what some of my neighbors have said, but I just did want to express I've gotten calls from a number of residents of our building who have certainly welcomed the idea of having the building turned into a single family residence, a renovation of the facade. But I have gotten a number of calls, not just from those who participated in this meeting, who are concerned though about the air and the blocking of light that would be in existence if that addition was put up. So I just wanted to note that because not all of our neighbors could attend this meeting, so it asked me to convey that. That's all I have to add. I think Ella and John and Lo said well some of the concerns that have been raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, David.
So anybody else from the public?
Yes, looks like Joanna.
Looks like we all have.
Good evening. As somebody who does live in the B line, I just wanted to reiterate that there is a huge concern for the loss of light, the loss of air, the loss of view. And although we hope, many of us hope you would do something with less impact on that, and maybe a roof garden would be great, but it will definitely have an impact on people's light, air, and view. And please do consider that. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, Nancy, go ahead.
My name's Nick. My wife and I, Nancy, my wife and I, also are in the B line at 1199 Park Avenue. I think we have nothing to speak about regarding the preservation issues. Obviously, I'm ignorant of them, but can attest to the fact that we will lose probably 50% of what little light we get. We're on the 4th floor, so the extension in the back goes beyond the 4th, or at least up to the 4th floor right now, but we'll lose light and certainly air. I have it's more of a question. What is the space on the roof slated to be? I mean, what is the intention to use that space for?
May I answer that question?
Sure.
Jose Ramirez, architect.
Hi.
All right, the space on the top floor will be just an entertainment space, a lounge area.
So it doesn't seem like a stretch if it were in fact a roof space or a garden space rather.
Well, the only issue with
design is the design or the intended roof as much, use as much.
Right. The only issue is the space is not that large, and if we set the space, we created any roof space and moved the space forward, then it would be more visible from the street. And our goal was to limit the visibility from the street. I just wanted to speak to
change the nature of the space from an enclosed space for entertainment to an open space for entertainment.
I would have to discuss that with the owners. I just wanted to clarify some comments that were made by some of the speakers and the neighbors. As far as overreaching, we don't think this is the addition is overreaching because we're actually not extending beyond the point of what the existing rear is there now. We're not extending beyond the existing L that's there. So any windows from 1 through 5 on the adjacent building is not being blocked. It's not changing from what's there now. Only floors 6 and 7 with the addition will have some obstruction of light. So I just want to make sure that we understand that blocking of light is only really an issue if it is an issue for floors 6 and 7. The building juts out as it is now. It's there, and we're not making any addition towards the apartment building. The addition is on the north side, filling in a corner that it's an indentation now. So to answer the question about blocking of light and encroaching upon green space, technically we're not encroaching upon any green space in the rear because we're only extending to the point that the building is extended now. So just wanted to clarify some of those points that were made. So like I said, the blocking of light is almost non-existent because it only exists on 2 floors. It's not encroaching upon any green space more than the existing addition encroaches now. And we think that the rear of the building is in keeping with the character of rear additions proposed for similar buildings. And obviously the front facade is a neoclassical facade in keeping with what's been approved before for other projects in the district.
Looks like we have at least
Susie?
one more.
Susie, confirm unmuting. There you go.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to point out one other thing is obviously precedent. We've discussed this a little bit before, but there is one other townhouse that has within that block. So at 1215, I believe, just recently sold and changed hands. I don't know what the plans are. I don't know who is going to buy it, but certainly whoever has bought it must be looking with an eye to what happens on the block and what is allowed to happen. And I believe one of my neighbors has spoken to the idea that people are watching what's going on, and if some things are allowed to happen, then we could continue. You can see a continuation of more of the homes that are being turned over, also asking for extensions and for increases, increases into the light and the space into the donut and into the green space.
Susie, to answer your comment, we're not encroaching upon the light into the green space more than the building encroaches now. We're actually aligning with the existing encroachment that's there now, and it's not even up to the required 30-foot rear yard setback. We're actually further in. As the owner, when he spoke, said, we're just interested in aligning the rear of the building and not exceeding the rear of the existing building.
I would really I would invite you to come and sit on my roof and tell me that building the additional space that you're going to be building is not going to be encroaching on any light and not reducing my visibility, my light, or any of the air flowing through. I find that difficult to believe from my point of view, sitting up on my roof.
This is not meant to be a discussion. We want your comments, but we don't have the time for discussion. We still have 2 more beyond this particular application. So I would appreciate it if people are not repetitive. And Mr. Ramirez, if you want to answer a question, I'm happy to let you do it. Just let me know that you want to answer it.
Thank you.
Have Joanna. You should see a prompt to confirm unmuting. Great. Joanna?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Ramirez, in all due respect, it will absolutely impact the light,
Please
air.
tell us where you live. You live in 1199?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
It will impact the light, the air of the 5th floor. It really will. I look at it, I see it. It absolutely will impact it. No question. I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that the end of the?
Yes, David.
If that's the end of testimony from the public, may I just make one comment in response
Yes.
that hasn't been touched on yet? I just want to explain, going back to one of Lo's comments about why LPC very often requires rear additions to maintain the top floor rear facade of a row house untouched. The reason for that, and I can tell you from experience, having worked at LPC and being a consultant for about 13 years now, the reason is that the top floor rear facade is often kept as basically like a last vestige of a way to maintain evidence of the original relationship between a house and the other houses built within its row. In this case, this house has already been completely separated from its relationship from the rest of the houses in its row. That began with the alteration to the front facade that changed its design entirely. And at the rear facade, it had this staircase installed. It's got a neighboring house that has, as you can see in these photos here, the rear facade of that house has been parged. It's had this rooftop addition built that is in the same plane as the rear facade. So that in itself it interrupts that original relationship between this house and the remaining houses in its row. So for that reason, we feel it's appropriate to simply square off the rear of this house, to square off that L, to create a view that is still going to be very similar for the neighbors to the north. Again, they'll still be looking at brick. It's just going to be brought forward a few feet. That's it. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. I think it's time to go to the committee, and I think we should go in reverse order, please.
Should I stop share? What would you like me to do?
That's how you do it, please.
Yes, you can leave it up.
Okay. Should I go? Maybe I'll go to the last page.
Thank you, David. I had to thank it was a very good presentation. They did a very good job. She made a lot of efforts to demonstrate, especially the rooftop additions in the neighborhood and different places. I think I appreciate a lot of work over there. And thank you for the owners, the goals. I think I will appreciate always the opinion right here. But the bottom line is very simple. It's true that the wall, the rooftop addition, is not adjacent or is not parallel to the adjacent building. Yes, there is a gap, but the issue right there is you have a wall probably 4, 5, 6 feet away from there, and in the past they didn't have it. So I think this is the major concern that provide light and in some way ventilation too. And I think the view, that's where is the bottom line and the top. Yes, you try to push as much as you can to the back of the rear of the building. Yes. Also, yes, there is another addition, but the point is, if we allow you to complement this dent, that's more or less I'm seeing that. Then the other buildings probably going to continue. And our goal, I think, my perception is to always to preserve and maintain the historical of this district, especially the district that we are talking right here, Carnegie Hill. And one of the major issues that I found one of the principal historical elements on Carnegie Hill is the donuts. And I can see it right there is a beautiful donut. It's true also, yeah, you don't encroach the donut, and do you just try to avoid this dent that existed, the L shape. But on the other hand, the other property adjacent, yes, it will be impacted because at this time, at least this dent provides some light and ventilation. At the beginning, I was a little bit confused, but when I was seeing the adjacent building, the neighbor building, I think they may be convinced that yes, you impact in some way the light and ventilation. And thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you, David.
Thank you, Marco. Next up is Anthony.
Okay. Where to begin? All right. I really object to the fifth floor. I guess it's fifth floor addition, the rooftop addition. I think we very rarely, as a committee and as a community board, have the opportunity to stand up for people who live next door to subject properties. And the applicant here, although I am sure well-intentioned, is in fact blocking windows of people who have bought their apartments secure in the understanding that their views and their light would last forever. And as I said, we rarely have the opportunity to stand up for these people because too many buildings are built as of right, blocking windows, blocking light and air to apartments. And you can pretend all you like that 3 or 4 feet constitutes air and it constitutes light bouncing around inside this cavity between the two buildings. But the fact of the matter is, those apartments will be darker than they are today. And it's just not fair. And I think that it is also disingenuous to imagine that, and I probably misquote, but quote, just filling in the L doesn't have an impact on the other houses that face that or sit alongside it. And I think that the building at the corner, Susie Waba's house, is, I've never been inside it. I wish I could someday. It is magnificent. It is a fabulous building. It looks wonderful, as do its neighbors. And I think that leads me to my other major point. So I don't like the fifth floor. I don't like filling in the backyard, although the arrangement of the facade in the back is fine. But I think that this is another missed opportunity. And in fact, here, I mean, again, I know we're not supposed to design them. We're not supposed to offer these as design critiques. I can't help myself. I'm an architect. It's what I do. You've taken what is basically, Mr. Ramirez, you've taken what is basically an uninteresting facade and you've made it dull. This is not neoclassical. This is about as neoclassical as the modern building just to the south of it, the apartment house. It lacks all of the character and personality. And I think if you go to one of the other slides, the slide that has it's number 5, that has what this looked like at the initially, or at least in 1939. That's a building with a lot of personality and character. And it's also not limestone. It's not white. Most of New York, and certainly most of New York in this period, was not white. And it's just, this is cool and idiosyncratic. What you're proposing is dull. And I'm going to, I cannot support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sarah.
Hi, thank you for this application. I really appreciate that the owners are here. It has to be difficult to hear criticism of your plan. And I also appreciate the applicant's thorough presentation. I think that from what I'm trying to understand, that there's some conflation between comments that the architect made about filling out the L and the comments that were intended for that versus the rooftop addition. And so it was helpful to see that the filling out of the L does not encroach further into the donut, and that it was filling out kind of the existing length, I guess is what you might call it, of that building. I very much appreciate that the facades will be improved, and that the plan is to make this building a nice addition to the block. But I do agree with Anthony about the rooftop addition and really directly blocking windows that will directly impact the quality of life for neighbors. I understand that there is an interest in not blocking lot line windows and not having the rooftop addition visible from the public way. But I don't think that it would be very difficult for me to support a rooftop addition that directly blocks the main windows of people's homes. And so I feel like I've heard more information that is helpful about the rear yard and its relation to the donut, but I remain concerned about the rooftop addition. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Alita.
Thank you. For the reasons expressed by Lo and by my colleagues, Anthony and Sarah, I oppose the rooftop addition. I also oppose the rear yard extension, even though it is filling in the L. It is too big, too bulky. And although it's not quite the same scale and certainly not the design of 210 East 62nd Street, it reminds me, listening to the comments of the neighbors, of how we should have learned a lesson in terms of bulk, where Lowe has talked about the integrity of the donut here, and that will be impinged upon by the extension. I have to object on that basis. I also would like to just address and again, the rooftop is just simply too big. I have to address the front facade. Not only is it not particularly interesting, it looks like it's not any kind of, from the photos, it sounded a lot better from the verbal description, and thank you for your detailed and clear presentation, but it sounded much better than it looks. It just doesn't look like it has any particular design quality to it, and that its limestone just draws attention like a beacon to it. So I oppose the facade as well. I'd also like to just say historic districts have value, and the extensions and the rooftop additions eat away at the value of these districts by drips and drabs. And sooner or later, we're going to have nothing but buildings with modifications eating into the public way, using up the rear and adding to the roof, which is also the public way in terms of light and air. So I just think this is way too much and oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Michelle.
Thank you. Did I hear you say that the front facade would also have a fence in the front door?
Am I allowed to speak?
Yeah, well,
Yes.
to answer that question,
Yes.
please.
Yes.
You said, yeah, okay.
hold on.
So
A gate.
does that,
Let me
you
show.
did say that.
Unfortunately, it's not in the renderings. Let me just get
no,
to.
I get that.
Let me get to the
But
page.
does it interfere, when that fence is installed, does it come onto the public way? Does it come past the footprint of the building?
No, it would be in.
It's
at the
within
top
the
of the stair.
footprint of the building?
Yes, within the property line.
Oh, it's internal to the stair. In other words, it's
Well,
not
it's at the
front
top
of
of
it.
the.
It's like a
right.
gate.
Right, so you can see the stairway in plan. So the stairs go down from the sidewalk, and they would just be putting a railing around them. And there's a railing there now, but there just isn't a gate.
And
So
then
they'd
it's
be
a gate.
replacing the railing and adding a gate as well.
Okay,
Just
so that
and the
doesn't
gate,
encroach.
right, and the gate is just, added security, not wanting to find
Right.
people
No,
sleeping
I
in
understand that.
your stairs
All
one day.
right. Well, for the rear of the building, first of all, the two big windows, I think it's too much glazing. Nobody really spoke about that today because we're a bit overwhelmed by the bulk and the negative impact of the bulk on its neighbors. But I think it's too much glazing, even though you did break it up. There's a lot of divided lights here. I assume some of those are doors to come out to the rear yard. But all in all, it's just too big and too bulky. And so for that reason, I would have to oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Elizabeth.
I think that I must say that the design is an improvement on the existing. I have to say something nice about this, but it's not hard not to be better than the current situation. I think I do hope we have an influence on affecting one's neighbors. I have a fear that under the zoning that they have the right to do this. But I think that the extension into the rear yard, the donut is an important part of the historic district, and I think that extension must be considered inappropriate. I think that the rooftop addition, one has to say that it is inappropriate because of the damage it does to its neighbors, and protecting those neighbors perhaps is something that should be counted in historic district designation, and so I can't support this either. Thank you for your presentation.
I guess it's Jan.
Oh, David, thank you. I will not support the application. Thank you.
It sounds like we have a lot of negative commentary about this. I would just like to give it a little bit of balance, even though I doubt that I would vote for it. As far as the front goes, sometimes an okay design that is quote appropriate is better than what was there before. And I think we've been very harsh on that front. I don't think it's a terrible design, but it may not be an inspired design. It seems like it's got a lot of inspiration from a lot of other conversions and or existing buildings, many of which Ms. Valley shown us. And as far as the rear goes, I have no problem with the infill. I think that it's not hurting anybody's light and air. And we don't have a problem with the first 4 stories. I also don't have a problem with following the zoning or the multiple dwelling law when it comes to lot line windows and light and air. And as Elizabeth pointed out, that would all be followed here. It looks to me like it is as a right from the multiple dwelling law and also as a right under the zoning. However, as an issue of scale, and possibly as an issue of, is that really a necessary use for the house? But looking at it as an issue of scale in relation to the building next door, if I'm remembering it correctly, I don't think that top floor really should be built. So I'm not quite as negative as the rest of my colleagues, but I would not support it either. So with that said, I think we need a proposal for a resolution. Alita?
Thank you. I'd like to propose a resolution disapproving the application as presented.
Seconded by Michelle. So let's call the roll.
Do you think we could keep the screen share?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, sorry. Thank you.
Yes?
Gail? Oh, I'm sorry, Gail has left. Michelle?
Did you call my name? Sorry.
I did.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Alita?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Yes.
Marco?
Yes.
We have a unanimous disapproval.
Saida, just letting you know that your voice is fading in and out.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. We have a unanimous disapproval.
We're going to move right along to the next application, 10 East 76th Street. This is a Beaux-Arts style building designed by Schwartz and Gross, constructed in 1907-08. Application is for replacement of existing areaway, etc. And adding, there's reconfiguring existing rear yard extensions and adding an elevator bulkhead. Is the architect here, Stephen Harris?
So presenting is going to be Aaron and John Wool. Aaron, confirm and meeting.
Hi, thanks, Ada.
Are you with
John-
Stephen Harris Architects?
Oh, no, I'm with Higgins, Quays, Barth and Partners, and John Wall is Stephen Harris. I think he's unmuted now, and he'll be sharing the screen, Jane.
And your name, it's R-U-L-I?
R-U-L-L-I, Aaron Ruley.
Okay, thank you. And you're with Higgins, Quays, Barth. Thank you.
Barth, yep, thanks.
Good evening.
John, do you want to share the screen?
Oh, that's an excellent suggestion.
Now that we've crossed the 9 o'clock hour.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, do I have screen sharing ability here? Share
You do.
screen. There we go. How's this?
Perfect, thank you. So I'll get started and walk us through the history and restoration scope, and then John's going to walk you through the specifics of the design. We'll move briskly through this in the interest of time. But thank you for taking the time to meet with us and for us to share this proposal with you. As you can see in front of us, this is 10 East 76th Street. It's a 1907-08 Beaux-Arts house designed by Schwartz and Gross. It was most recently used, occupied as a doctor's office on the ground floor and then apartments above, and it's being converted back to a single family residence. And the scope of work includes replacement of the existing non-historic areaway railing. That is the subject of a long-standing inherited violation, so we're going to be resolving that as part of this project. Restoring the second, third, and fourth floor windows to the original condition, configuration, and reconfiguring some of the existing rear yard extensions. And then at the rooftop, there's elevator, stair bulkhead, mechanical, and some railings around the perimeter. So if we could go to the next slide, John. Great. So property is located on the south side of East 76th Street between 5th Avenue and Madison in the Upper East Side Historic District. Next slide. And here you can just get a sense of the block context. So our site is outlined in red. And as you can see in just the overall block, there's a great variety. There's no cohesive mid-block green space or donut, and really no discernible row or continuity between the former row house presence on the block. The existing building was one of 10 row houses originally, and was expanded in the early 20th century. But it really, even though it's called was given the description of being a new facade, it's really very much a reconstruction because the scale of it changed significantly. And we see that in this footprint here, where the rear yard extension, the rear extension is a full 6 stories. And it's continuous with the uppermost floor of the house. So there's a setback 6th floor. Maybe John, if you could just show where the setback starts on the right there.
Right there.
And so that extends all the way back. And so as part of this, we're going to reconfigure, break that down a little bit, and redistribute some of that massing. Next slide. And so here we just see the building in its overall context. The building to the east, on the left, to the left of number 10, was a refacing of a non-historic building that happened about 15 years ago, 10 to 15 years ago. So that is an entirely new facade, as is the rear, which we'll take a look at a little bit into the presentation. Next slide. So here, just to give you a sense, so as I mentioned, the building was one of a row of 10, and so you can see the little brownstone that's sort of sneaks into the view of this historic photo on the left. That was what was originally here. So in 1907, it gets its new Beaux-Arts facade expanded significantly out to the property line, roof levels raised, and of course the rear of the building is extended. But what we see here is the original entry balustrade, which is a configuration of balusters and a wide top rail that picks up on the vocabulary of the piano nobile with the stone balusters, and then also up at the top floor where there's another balustrade. And the original window configuration, which is typical of Beaux-Arts style, the 1/1 double hung window that we see on all of the floors. By the time of the tax photo in the center view, the windows on the piano nobile and the third floor had been changed to casement windows with a leaded glass pattern. And then on the right is a photograph from 2006. And so this shows the existing railing intact, which had been removed in the late 80s, early 90s by the former owner, and replaced with this new sort of simple railing system. And that is, again, the subject of violation. And then they also added multi-light casement windows at the fourth floor. And so up until the 1990s, those had been the historic double hung windows. Next slide. And then just to look at this in a bit more detail, we have the existing areaway railing at the top and the historic configuration at the base and at the bottom of the view. And so you can see the difference, that sort of stocky baluster with the really elegant wide top rail, and the difference between the existing and historic conditions. Next slide. And so our proposal includes restoring back to the original design, but we're proposing to do that in a cast stone material that would more closely align with the limestone balusters up on the upper floors of the building. But the design of the baluster and the top rail would more closely mimic the historic condition, as would the gate at the that takes you down to the cellar level on the west side of the building. Next slide. So in the early 1990s, when the previous owner was trying to resolve their violations, they went to the commission and they tried to legalize the existing railing, and the commission denied that. But then they came back with a alternate plan, which includes these cast stone balustrade that you see on the screen. And that was ultimately approved by the commission in the mid 1990s. But they never executed the design. So this was the approved condition by Landmarks, but never realized. But as you can see, it still is not, even though it's picking up on the baluster vocabulary and using the stone materiality of what's happening above, it still had this very sort of regular design across and regular height, none of that variation or contrast that the historic had. Next slide. And then on the upper floors, as I mentioned, the piano nobile and third floor had been converted in by the time of the tax photo. The uppermost floor, those windows are from the 1990s and had been up until that point the double hung windows. And we see on the right the historic window configuration, these very large double hung windows, 1/1, which is typical of the style. We also have intact ground floor windows. So behind the grills at the ground floor of the building are intact wood windows. So we have the brick mold details and all of the proportions and profiles to which we can match the windows for the upper floors. Next slide. And then here, just a few examples of other Beaux-Arts buildings in the district where you can see that the the windows. This is a sort of characteristic window type, and that the multi-light windows were not typical for this style building. Next slide. And I think I'm going to pass the presentation to John now, but my one thought I would offer is that when you look at the existing condition and the proposed condition, the sort of improvement that we're seeing here is really reinstating the quiet elegance of the building. There's a gravitas in both the going back to the historic window configuration and that railing pattern that really sort of stabilizes the building and gives it something back that it is missing at this point.
Thank you, Erin. I think along those lines, one thing that also becomes apparent in this elevation is you see the change to the fenestration of the existing penthouse setback. That facade is not visible from anywhere in the public right-of-way, but to the point that Erin made, I think we're trying to pull it back to a more rational expression and not so much of the kind of fanciful, unintegrated approach that seems to have happened over time to the building. Going to the rear, this is what the existing rear looks like. You know, we do a lot of these buildings, and I have to tell you, I've never seen air conditioners like this hung like luggage off the back of a
John, may I
Volkswagen.
stop you just for 1 second? I just want to clarify for all of us that there are in the rear 2 elevations, one facing east and one facing south. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So this is the existing elevation, and to that, Chair Partial, you see here the east-facing windows and the south-facing windows, and then the rear facade of the building has the south-facing windows. These are some close-ups of those, some ironwork balconies. We don't have records of this being approved by the commission. At least these fenestration changes, obviously, the massing is pre-existing designation. Again, additional context photos. This is the proposal. So the proposal is that if you look to the left, you'll see that there's currently a 1-story addition that's built full. We are proposing to remove that back to the boot that currently exists. We're also proposing to remove the top floor of that boot and create a recreation yard up there. And then building a small addition on the east portion here that projects about 5 feet out from the existing facade, leaving a 30-foot rear yard. So that's the proposal here in the back, and then refenestrating that
John,
brick.
you're going too quickly for me.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. I just want to go over this once again. You're removing a 1-story addition.
Correct.
How many square feet is that?
That's a really good question. It is approximately, let's see, it's about 12.6 by I think about 10 feet. So let's call it about 125 square feet.
125 square feet. Then, so you're removing that 1-story, but you're adding an additional story where?
We are also removing the top floor of that rear extension.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, and then you could continue from there.
And then we are adding in the red that you see on the right, a 5-story, 5-foot deep infill piece between the existing boot and the existing rear of the building.
When you say the existing boot, you're talking about the existing extension.
Correct. Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. It's very confusing.
Even
though you
yeah.
show it in different colors, I see in your drawing. Thank you.
You're welcome. These are the 2 elevations of the south-facing elevations, existing and proposed. And so you'll see here the removal of the one-story rear addition, and then that facade being refenestrated, the recreation yard on the top there. And then to the east, this is the existing east elevation, and that's the proposed east elevation. Again, existing here, and then pulling this off and refenestrating that, removing this. And there's the proposed.
Just to backtrack.
Yep.
Windows.
Mm-hmm.
The windows are being changed on both of these elevations. Are you increasing or decreasing? It looks like it's all glass now. At the top of the one.
Correct.
Two,
So
the
if we
sixth floor, is that?
yeah
No,
yeah
the
so
fifth floor.
yeah, if we take this east elevation as an example, we're removing the mass that's up there here on this sixth floor. That goes away. Then we are putting new windows and patching in openings on each of the subsequent floors. And I believe that there is a net increase in the amount of glazing.
But you don't know how much.
I can certainly, I could put together a calculation. I don't think I'd have it.
It's so wonderful if you said, right now, there are 10 windows on the south elevation, and the proposed elevation will have 11 windows, or something to give us something concrete.
Sure. So
but
on this,
we'll show pictures at the full board. So
sure, on this east
okay,
side,
but
we
there
have,
will be a net increase in glazing.
yes, there will.
Okay.
And then on the
Just a
south,
footnote.
on the south, I do believe it probably is pretty equal, especially if you remove the top floor of the extension. So I think that's pretty close to what's there, maybe slight increase.
And I think, I would just add that they're all punched openings. So nothing is going like a clear span across the facade. So you get that sort of very, very clear punched openings within the masonry wall. And it, is rationalizing a kind of erratic condition, I think, especially on that east facing facade.
Yeah. Looking at it within context, this shows the whole donut of the block as Aaron had introduced it. There are a number of, as you can see, there's no kind of continuous open space. There is a major precedent directly behind us where 9, 11, and 13 East 75th.
We just lost you.
Oh, I'm sorry. 9, 11, and 13 East 75th have all been joined together as one house now that's under construction, with a kind of open space that at the same time is blocked off with existing remaining brick walls that were left at the property perimeter. And we will look at that precedent here. This is that which I'm sure came before this committee in the past. This is being constructed now right here, which is just catty corner kind of behind us right here. And then another precedent, which Aaron had mentioned, is our direct neighbor here, 12 East 76. This is our facade that we're proposing to renovate. And that facade was altered extensively. It had a kind of bay porch projection here that was removed, and it was fully refenestrated with additional glazing. And it was also raised, and the parapet was raised higher. These are photographs of mock-ups on the roof. We are building an elevator, which has a bulkhead, and we're also extending up a stair bulkhead. There's also some mechanical equipment on the roof. These are showing some photographs. It is not visible from directly across the street, but there is some visibility. So here you'll see there's a tiny bit of mechanical equipment that's peeking up right there from this C shot. nothing from the D. And then from the E shot, you see two other pieces of mechanical equipment and a little bit of a rail that's there for safety purposes. Next. And then from the corner of Madison and 76th, you see the rail, some of the mechanical equipment, and just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of the top of the elevator bulkhead against the secondary facade of the Fifth Avenue building beyond. And again, from the far side of Madison Avenue, with a huge zoom in here, you can see some of the mock-up there, including the elevator bulkhead. This is looking at the materials. So on the front, we are proposing cast stone and restoration of the existing ground floor ironwork or bronze work, I guess, as well as replacement of the windows back to the original stately Beaux-Arts configuration. On the rear, we are proposing steel windows, painted brick, and there'll be some mesh in the area of the recreation yard. And this is our proposal. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I didn't mean to, I think I'm just love to hear specifics about measurements and window changes and how many windows are going to be replaced and how many new windows there will be, et cetera. But I appreciate the presentation. And we'll see if anybody from the public is here and wants to speak to it.
Yes, if you're a member of the public and you'd like to speak, you can go to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and select raise hand. I don't see any, Jane.
Thank you, Saida. I guess we can go to the committee and we'll start with Elizabeth this time.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Yes, I think that this is the front facade is a very good return to Beaux-Arts buildings. And I think the glazing is absolutely correct. As I recall, and I lived in a Beaux-Arts building in London, that the 1/1 was a really big thing back just after the turn of the century, because they were able to make these larger panes of glass. And so this was just the last word in glazing at the time. And I think glad they're going back to it. And I think the front, the change of the railings back to the original, going back to the original is excellent. And I'm very much in favor of it. I'm not all that thrilled with the glazing on the rear facade. I think you've done such a spectacularly good job with glazing on the front facade, but I don't think maybe you could show the rear facade glazing. Yeah, that just plain isn't Beaux-Arts. And I think you've made such a good job on the front. I really wish that you would go for some sort of Beaux-Arts glazing, which this is not it on the rear facade. But I thank you for your presentation. And I think, except for the glazing on the rear facade, I think you've done a very good job.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. What was the rationale for this glazing on the rear facade?
I think it's to rationalize what's happening right now. It's such an erratic fenestration, and some of the curved windows felt so out of place. And I don't believe that the commission had ever approved those. I think those were done without approval. And so I think the goal here was to rationalize it and bring it back to a greater sort of sense of discipline.
But there was no real attempt at any kind of uniformity. For example, that multi-pane window that's under the play yard.
I would say that each of, if you look at it, each of the pieces of glazing itself are incrementally all the same size. So there is an order being brought in where each of the lights themselves as a module are all equal in size and proportion.
I suppose that's true, but the whole doesn't give, to me, a calming or rationalized overall picture. So I have a big problem with that. I'm perfectly happy with the front. The front, they're wood windows, and these are metal.
Correct.
Or aluminum.
These are steel in the back here. The front are wood.
And the front are all wood.
Yes.
And how about where you filled in the what's illustrated as the brown portion on this slide?
No, the brown portion on this slide is actually the neighbor.
Oh, okay. So we're not seeing where you.
Yes, you
have
are.
two facades.
Yes, you are. What? Oh, so yes. So then this then is the existing on the rear. Looking. This is the portion that faces east, and then this is the proposed facing east. And you'll see that this is this little bit right here is the part where the building is pushed back in that narrow slot.
Okay, and what's that other window up on top? Is that at the bulkhead?
That's a clerestory in the existing penthouse. So that mass is existing mass, and it's a clerestory window.
And what is that wall made out of? Is that stucco or stone or what?
It's existing, and so it's brick right now, and it will remain as painted brick.
And the rest of the extension?
It's, again, we're refenestrating it. We're not recladding it. It's going to be painted brick.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sorry, Alita?
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I think I'm okay with the front unless any of my colleagues are objecting to it, in which case I'll be listening to them. I have a little trouble with the back. My trouble really is the recreation center. I think noise matters as much as visual does, and I'm concerned. What are you putting up there? Are you putting up basketball hoops?
It may have basketball hoops. That hasn't been determined yet. The owners have very, very young children, and so they would like to know that if they were out there playing, that they would do so in a way that they felt safe, knowing that no one was going to fall off and no one was going to end up dropping anything off.
And they're to be commended for that. But people in my building who face another direction and face a basketball court that's on a low building complain about the noise. So I'm very conscious of that. And I just don't think it's right in a historic district of small buildings to have what could be basketball and could be very noisy. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next is Anthony.
Hi. Mildly, and I mean it, mildly troubled by the sort of schizophrenia of the restored wood windows on the front and the steel windows on the back. I don't mind the fenestration pattern. It's just there's a kind of this is not the first time we've seen this today, let alone every month. There's a kind of what feels to me as a desire expressed by the designers, by the architects, to differentiate between what's being restored and what's new. And sometimes I think we as professionals pursue a kind of pursue false differences. But having said that, I think that you very ingeniously made the existing mass smaller and better organized. And since your little 5-foot addition is certainly nothing nothing anyone can complain about. The existing windows are wild, and I would love to know what the origin of that existing rear facade was in somebody's mind.
As would I.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's
especially the painting. The painting is really something. The fresco,
yeah,
let's call it
yeah,
the fresco.
It's great. Anyway, I don't think we miss losing it. So I have one other little tiny thing, which has to do with the front balustrade, which when I look at the original photos, I like the wide top rail and all of that, but I'm really perplexed by the spacing of the original balusters, which seems very wide and kind of weird. And why the heck is it metal? Because it's like metal in imitation of stone.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and then the only other thing I would say is that it's nice that you're doing nice cast stone balusters. It might be even nicer if you would consider having your client do them in stone. But that's
certainly worth consideration.
It is aesthetically very rewarding to use real stone that matches the facade. And that's it. Thank you.
Marco?
I think the success, well, I think in the front facade you did the right thing. I think that your success, basically, you work very well with the mass of the building. You start reducing one side, increasing a little bit, and you reach ready to look a box. You are coming with different shapes, different volumes, which makes it more attractive, your proposal. It bothered me a little bit, the excessive of fenestration in the rear yard. But at the end of the day, I think it's, you have the right to do whatever you think. And thank you so much for removing these balcony cages. That's what it is. So I think you did the right thing. And for that reason, I think, just only for that reason, I will support your application. No, I think you did a very good job. A very good job in everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jane, David?
Yes, it's David. The front, I think, is fine. I agree with Anthony that balusters should be real stone. I think that the owners over time will not be happy. The cast stone simply doesn't weather the way limestone or whatever the stone, the real stone is on the building. But it would not be a reason for my not approving what I think is a very good solution for the front. The back, I'm not as disturbed as some people seem to be. I think there are a lot of precedents for the fronts and the backs being different. There are a lot of precedents for the fronts being Beaux-Arts and the back being more contemporary and more ordered in certain ways. I'm not sure that we had to break up the windows in smaller panels as you did, although I understand that that's more typical for traditional steel windows, but even today, the steel windows have very large panes of glass. But I'm okay with the way you've organized the back. I have no problem with the mesh. I rather enjoy hearing children's voices. It's part of our civilization. It's part of the city. And I can't imagine that playing basketball are really going to disturb anybody in any adjoining buildings. So I just think that's a well deference and inconsequential comment. On balance, I think it's a very well done job and it certainly has my support.
Jane?
Last words.
Oh, I think we lost Jane.
You know, give her a minute and we'll find a way to come back.
Jane, confirm unmuting.
Yeah.
Am I okay now? I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. But you're waiting for my comment. I'm going to support the application. I agree with David. I do agree the balustrade should be real stone. And even though I will kind of miss the whimsy of the arched windows at the rear elevation, it's not enough for me to not support the application.
You have a raised hand from Marco?
Marco, could we
thank
go
you.
back to this?
Thank
Could we remove the screen share so that I can see everyone, or there you go.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Jane.
I
Thank
don't
you,
know what
Jane.
happened. I apologize to everyone.
Thank you, Jane. I would like to put the motion to approve as presented. Thank you. Is anybody can second?
Seconded.
I think Michelle seconded.
Whoever.
So I think we could go to a vote.
1 second while I unmute everyone.
Thank you, Saida.
Elizabeth?
Pass.
Okay. Michelle?
Yes.
Alita?
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Marco?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
No.
We have 6 in favor and 1 opposed.
Saida, thank you. And thank you for your patience with all of us and with me.
Okay, our last application, 992 Madison Avenue. CB8M Architects, the neo-Italian Renaissance style apartment hotel designed by Schwartz and Gross and constructed in 1927. Application extension to existing LTC temporary art installation permit. So who's the architect here?
Hi, my name is Alyssa Karotkin. I'm not the architect, but I work for the Alexico Group, and we were the sponsor and developer of the hotel. And along with me tonight is Etienne Haro, who is the general manager of the hotel. Let me try and share my little presentation.
What is the hotel? Just as a
Park Hotel at 25 East.
Oh, okay. I know where it is. Thank you.
992 Madison. Okay, can you all see that?
We can see it, yes.
Okay, and can you also unmute ATN? Because he's gonna join the presentation as well.
Thank you.
Hi, ATN. So, and it's been a long night. We don't plan to take too much of your time, but we wanted to provide you with a bit of information on the no vacancy art installation that's currently installed at the Mark Hotel on the corner, it's on the hotel facade on the corner of 77th Street and Madison Avenue. The Mark Hotel collaborated with the acclaimed artist Warren Neidick on this light installation, and what it does is the sculpture flashes an anagrammatic phrase of no vacancy and NYC. And what this does, it celebrates the city being back in action after this COVID pandemic. And so it's showing the resiliency that there is no vacancy left in New York. So here are just a few different angles, that I'm showing you. Like, I've tried to capture, it's a little hard to see when it's lit up. The first one saying no vacancy, the middle one showing NYC, and then the last on the photo on the right just shows you how it's mounted on the wall, on the facade, and it's very minimal and doesn't take up too much space. So as people walk the streets of our community, they unexpectedly come across this no vacancy sign at the Mark Hotel. They stop and take a moment to reflect on it. We've witnessed people enjoying the juxtaposition of a luxury hotel having a no vacancy sign, but then they realize it's art and they have an unexpected smile that comes onto their face. And as you know, our community is very well known for its prestigious boutiques, flagship stores, and art galleries. And this no vacancy sign is in walking distance to all these different galleries. And we think it's a really good addition to the area. So I'm going to turn it over here now to ATN so he can give you a little more information about the neighborhood and how the installation is being enjoyed by the public.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us. So adding to what Alisa just said, a purpose of public art is to encourage people to pay attention and to perceive, more deeply the entire environment that they occupy. Right? And as such, we think that this work, it really reflects, not only the specific context in which it was created by the artist, but also highlights general resilience and general this idea of optimism, the people of New York, and somehow, gathering the thoughts of the residents in the neighborhood. Someone the other day, was telling me about the whole, of course, history of Madison Avenue with the advertising industry and how somehow, this artwork creates almost a historic links to the advertising industry and how communication media, plays on emotions. These few blocks where we are on the west bordered by the Museum Mile, on the east by Madison Avenue and some of the most world-class galleries in the world, is gaining further momentum over the next few months, next few years, over the next few months with some more openings of prominent art galleries like White Cube in London, actually opening straight in our block, or in a few years, as you've heard, I'm sure recently, with the relocation of the global headquarters of Sotheby's, to the iconic Brower building just down the road, and as such, I think these few blocks are essentially becoming, the artistic center of the city, and we believe this artwork somehow found really its place, found really its home.
Thank you. Is that the presentation?
Jane, I've got it.
Pretty much,
Oh,
yes.
sorry,
We're just-
David. I must be getting punchy. Sorry.
That's okay. If you want to write it up, you can have it.
So we've put in an application with the landmarks to extend the permit for an additional 2 years.
Well, I was going to ask that question. So it's up to
And
2 years.
just so you know, the installation was very easy. It's just 4 holes on each side of the sign drilled into the mortar in the joists, and once we remove it, we can easily fix it with the approved mortar, and it's fill in those holes.
Is the extension 2 years? Is the total 2 years? How long is it supposed to be there?
It's been there for a year, which was the first approved permit. And then now we're an additional 2 years.
Okay. How tall is it?
It's about 14 feet high.
And essentially, I understand the reasoning correctly. Number one, it's the phone of there's no vacancy left in New York. I hope that's true for the Mark and for all of your sister hotels. Last time I read it was 79% occupancy in hotels in New York. I don't know how close that was to the truth. I trust the Mark.
You're well informed.
And that because this is an art object in some sense, it's also calling attention as one makes the connection to the fact that it's becoming an art center with more and more galleries.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, I think we understand what this unique installation is all about. And, let's see if there's anybody in the public who would like to comment.
If you're a member of the public that would like to speak, you can raise your virtual hand by going to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. I don't see any, David.
Then I think we should go to the committee and we'll start with reverse order with Marco.
Marco, go ahead.
Thank you, David. You said that these numbers or letters is already in place?
Yes.
And the only thing you're asking for an extension for 2 years?
Yes.
Well, I don't have no comments at all, but since it's installed, it's very hard to start asking more technical questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony?
I don't have any problem with this, but just to make one comment, I live further east on 77th Street, and I will confess to have never noticing this. So I have no objection to it continuing to be there. Thank you.
You have to join us one evening. I think it's more visible in the later.
Probably.
Anthony, your problem is that you're not a tourist.
That's right.
Next, we have Alita.
Thank you. I'm all in favor of art installations. I really am, but I'm not opposed to an art installation of this type, but I have a big problem with the message behind it. I'm not sure that this committee is the appropriate place to say that, but I think it's unwelcoming. And given the housing crisis in New York, I think it's not really appropriate either. So I'm not really sure how I'm going to vote, but thank you. And thank you for putting up an art installation of this nature. I think it's very brave of you, and it's very well welcome to me anyway. The idea of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle?
Okay. So this is lit. Where is the light source?
There must be some
It's internal to the sign.
yeah.
No cords run along the little
No, it
trenches?
comes, no,
Yeah.
it comes inside the
Yeah. It's funny, I don't remember this coming before us. I remember other vertical art installations, but this has been up a year. I don't ever remember it coming to us. Did it come to us?
No, when we originally did the first permit request, it was not a requirement.
It was not your what? Sorry?
It was not, LPC didn't say it was a requirement to present it, so.
So why would you present it now?
I think for the extension, because it's going past their typical 1 year permit.
Okay, I never heard that from LPC, but all right, if that's true, that's true. Anyway, I'm not happy about this being up for another 2 years, so I don't think I would support it. Thank you, though.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Yes, I'm a bit unhappy. I think if you had asked for another year, I could put up with it. But perhaps if it's invisible or Anthony can't see it, maybe it isn't disturbing. So I'm thinking about the 2 years.
Guess we're up to Jane.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, David. I think it's utterly charming and it's so subtle and I just think it's great. So I'm supporting it wholeheartedly.
Can you give me the name of the artist?
Warren Neidick, which is, I'll spell it for you. Just give me 1 second. N-E-I, N is in Nancy, E-I-D as in David, I-C-H. Warren Neidick.
I-D-H? N-E-I-D-I-H?
I-C-H.
I-E-H. N-E-I-D-I-E-H?
N-E-I-D-I-C as in cat.
I-C-H. All right. So it's Neidick.
Yes.
Thank you. I think the sign is okay. I hope people do see it and do make the connection you hope they'll make. And I think that they will think more about what does it mean more positively about the city than they will think about the issue of whether we have enough housing or not. So you have my support.
Thank you.
I think we need a resolution. It seems to me that there's one or two maybe more in favor than those opposed. So could somebody make a resolution?
Perhaps we could go back to delete the screen share. Thank you.
Alita?
I'd like to propose a resolution in favor of the application as presented.
Anthony, you're seconding it. Okay, please call the roll.
Okay. Elizabeth?
Yes.
Michelle?
No.
Alita?
I'm no censor, so yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Marco?
Yes.
6 in favor, 1 opposed.
Yeah, hesitate on that one, Martha.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, David, I was going to say that I'm going to vote yes with the condition that Anthony changes his glasses.
Okay, Jane, I return
Okay.
to you.
I don't think I got that. Is that an inside joke?
Well, I think it's that I said I couldn't see it, that I haven't seen it, and I live down the street.
But now you will see it because you'll be looking for it.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you to everyone. What
Thank
a
you all.
night. But wasn't it interesting? 2 of these huge properties are being converted back to single family homes, or 3 of the applications tonight.
And anyway, thank you to the presenters from the Mark Hotel.
Thank you very much. Have a good night. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, a touch of whimsy after a long night.
Jane,
Very
I
much
think
appreciated.
Michelle has her hand raised.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Fine with me. Okay.
Night, everyone.
Night.
See
Thank you,
later.
Saida.
My pleasure. Good night.
Oh,
Yes, thank you, Saida.
and
Thank you.
luckily we have a long time before we have to write up the resolutions.
You do enjoy.
Yeah, I'm going to. I'm going to. Anyway, thank you.
No problem. Good night.